Chapter 246. Quick, let's go and have a taste. Hearing this, the crowd immediately became restless. Then, one by one, they crowded forward, wanting to try this new thing. Even Yang Qindong was pushed to the side because there were too many people rushing up. The attraction of the two pressurized water wells was beyond Yang Qindong's expectations. After all, water was an indispensable part of the human body, so it was easier to arouse people's concern. After a full hour, the crowd's interest in the pressurized water wells was not as great. In the courtyard of the Yang Family Academy, 10 tables had already been set up. Because there were too many people, this was for the preliminary examination. The 500 people would be reduced to at least 4/5, which meant that only 100 people would be left. Even if it was 100 people, perhaps only half of them would be left. The 1-to-5 ratio in the preliminary examination made many people eager to try, thinking about how to enter the academy. One had to know that once one entered this place, not only would no one collect tuition fees, on the contrary, they would also take care of your 3 meals a day. For some poor people, they could learn knowledge without spending any money. It was a good thing that they could not ask for. The so-called preliminary examination was actually just filling in a form. For those who were illiterate, there would be someone who would explain it to them. In the end, they just had to act according to what they thought. The whole process of filling in the form was not complicated. In just 2 hours, the work of more than 500 people was completed. Next was the tour of the Yang Family Academy. The spacious and bright classroom, the new tables and chairs, as well as the erasable blackboard and chalk, once again became the focus of everyone's eyes. The tour lasted all the way until noon. Only then did people leave in 2s and 3s. Yang Qindong had already said that the results would be announced in 2 days. Who could enter the Yang Family Academy to study would be announced at that time. More than 2,000 people left with a satisfied expression. For many people, there was no need for this trip today. After hearing such a majestic poem and seeing many new things, it was enough for them to brag and show off to others. He Wan Yuan also left. Before he left, he even politely told Yang Qindong that if there was a shortage of teachers in the academy and he happened to be off duty, he would be willing to help for free. With regards to He Wan Yuan's initiative to express goodwill, Yang Qindong naturally smiled and agreed. However, only he knew in his heart that what he was teaching was not the flashy 4 books and 5 classics. He was teaching the way of survival. This was also a preparation for accumulating talents in the future. After everyone left, the area outside the Yang Manor became quiet again. However, Yang Qindong had no intention of resting at all. In his hands, he was holding the information added by the applicants and was checking them one by one. The security bureau was already on standby and fully cooperating. Once there was a talent that the young master had his eyes on, they would investigate him as quickly as possible and then verify the authenticity of his identity. Although Yang Qindong, who had made a great contribution, had taken the initiative to leave the court, he knew that his contribution was too great, so great that even the emperor had to be wary of him. Now that he had made such a big move, it was impossible for the academy not to be on guard. In fact, the security bureau had already found 3 secret agents of the embroidered uniform guard from the applicants. Although they were good at forging identities, in front of the extremely professional security bureau, they still revealed their foxtails. Not only were there secret agents of the embroidered uniform guard in the capital, but also spies sent by Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect, and there were as many as 8 of them. In addition, there were 2 spies sent by Walla Yes Hen. Looking at the applicants screened by the security bureau, Yang Qindong shook his head and smiled. They really think highly of me. It seems that the young master can't keep a low profile even if he wants to. Of course, in addition to these spies, there were indeed people with good conditions among the applicants. For example, the 4 forms on the table. The first was Wang Si, the grandson of the Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji. He had previously been an editor of the Hanlin Academy and was a 7th-rank official. He was also one of Yang Qindong's friends from a long time ago. Later, when Zhu Qiyu had taken over, Ji Ning had once sent people to blackmail Wang Ji. Because she had received very little, she was dissatisfied and removed Wang Si from his position. Although he was later reinstated, this young master no longer cared about official matters and became a frequent guest of the immortal abode. This person had also applied for the Yang Clan Academy. When he saw his name on the table, Yang Qindong pulled him out. After some deep thought, he decided to take him as a student. Yang Chendong had his own considerations for this. His attitude toward the great Ming dynasty was to boil the frog in warm water. In order to achieve this, the prerequisite was that there was enough warm water. He viewed Wang Xi as a part of the warm water, and he would be able to influence the young master and young lords. It was even possible that Wang Xi's attitude toward the great Ming dynasty would change. Yang Chendong had been very close to Wang Xi for a period of time, so he had a certain understanding of this person. He was very smart and did not have the bad habits of a hedonistic young master. In addition, he was not very old. As long as he was willing to learn, he would be able to achieve great things. The second person he chose was called Feng Ku, a dispirited scholar. When he was young, because he was smart, he had become an elementary scholar early on, allowing him to see the hope of changing his family. He had immersed himself in books, unable to extricate himself. However, people like this often did not excel in anything other than studying. Feng Ku was an example of this. His learning speed was indeed very fast, but he was lacking in contact with others, so he did not have many connections with other scholars. When he was taking the high scholar examination, he was tricked by another elementary scholar. He had stuffed an unimportant note into the bottom of his shoe and brought it into the examination room. Originally, this was just a joke to tease him. However, he did not expect the result to be so dramatic. Feng Ku became an elementary scholar, but the elementary scholar who put the note failed. Out of revenge and jealousy, this person reported this matter to the Imperial court. However, because things had changed, there was no way to investigate. However, because of this matter, Feng Ku was not given a position by the Imperial court. He only received the status of a high scholar. In addition, his parents had passed away early and he was not good at business. In the end, the fields in his family were sold to buy books. Now, even eating became a problem. This kind of bookworm, no matter where he went, he wouldn't be liked by anyone. However, Yang Chendong knew that this kind of person was more suitable for professional work. For example, the scientists in the future. It was because they had no desires and only had knowledge and science in their eyes that they were able to create many inventions. Accepting this person was to train Feng Ku as a seedling to be a scientist. The third person was called Chang Qianhao. He was from Jiangnan and was the son of the Chang family. Chang Qianhao's family background was very good, and his family background wasn't bad either. His appearance was distinguished and elegant, and the way he conducted himself was very smooth and sly. More importantly, this person had a good hand in calculating accounts, so much so that he was called the divine mathematician. He was chosen by Yang Chendong because he was good at arithmetic. As his business grew bigger, there was a lack of talents in this area. He was going to train this person as a future finance official. Although the Chang family was rich, Yang Chendong did not care about them. He believed that when he gave enough benefits, Chang Qianhao would know how to choose. Not to mention, he was confident that in the process of teaching him, he would completely convince this person. The last person's identity was a bit special. Not only was she a woman, she was also an armed escort. The profession of an armed escort was still very dangerous. After all, there were not so many cameras in ancient times. It was not like where the money trucks were attacked. Usually, there would be a lot of clues. It was because of the lack of information that robberies happened again and again. It also made this profession very risky. Men were not willing to take such a big risk, let alone a woman. However, this woman could choose this profession, which showed how powerful she was. Tai Qingyi, 23 years old, was called Iron Face and Benevolent Heart. Iron Face referred to the woman's serious face. Benevolent Heart referred to her bodhisattva's heart. According to the investigation of the Security Bureau, most of the money this woman earned was given to the poor people. This time, the reason why she wanted to come to the Yang Academy to study was that she lost her hand in the process of delivering an escort. As an armed escort, some people could work for a lifetime, but some people could only do it once. It all depended on her to ensure that the escorts were not lost. Unfortunately, although Tai Qingyi was good at fighting, the number of robbers she encountered was 3 times more than her. She was outnumbered and finally lost her escort, which made her lose her livelihood. She came to the Yang Academy to find a chance to survive and learn more skills. Of course, this had a lot to do with Yang Chendong's reputation outside. Otherwise, it would be difficult for an ordinary scholar to catch the attention of this extraordinary woman. Oh, right, when we were delivering the money in the morning, this woman was the one who shouted for the Duke to be righteous. Ha! Yang Chendong suddenly thought of something and said. Then, he laughed heartily and stored this woman's information. Over the next 2 days, the 100 selected students were divided into groups. Some of them still needed to be observed, but some of them had been predetermined due to their various skills and specialties. It was just that they were unaware of it. Currently, the people outside were still waiting for the results in 2 days. The Wang residence in the capital. As the Minister of Personnel for many years, Wang Zhi's influence was not only shown by his position, but also his hidden influence that people did not dare to underestimate. There was a saying in the Ministry of Personnel that the officials were a level higher than the officials, and the recommendation authority was in their hands. This caused some people to think of ways to curry favor with this master. As time passed, the saying that Wang Zhi's disciples were all over the world was no longer an adjective, but a fact. Chapter 247. Wang Zhi was so prestigious, but his most beloved grandson Wang Si did not go against his wishes and applied for the Yang Academy. After learning the truth, the minister flew into a rage in his study and called Wang Si and his son over to give them a good scolding. When it came to his grandson, Wang Zhi cared about him more than just love. He hoped that the power of the Wang family could continue, at least not fall, so he always paid attention to the teaching and training of his descendants. All along, Wang Si's performance was reassuring. At such a young age, he was already an editor of the Hanlin Academy and a 7th-rank official. If he was sent out of the capital, he would at least be a county magistrate. But who would have thought that after being suspended from his duties, he no longer had any desire to improve himself when he was reinstated. Not only did he eat and drink every day, he even applied for the Yang Family Academy behind Wang Zhi's back. How could Wang Zhi not be angry? In the study, Wang Zhi knelt on the ground after being reprimanded, but his face was full of dissatisfaction. Grandfather, didn't you say that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage has a promising future and is very talented? You also said that I should learn from him when I have time. Now that I have applied for the Yang Academy and will become his student, why are you not happy? I am now 27 years old, but I don't feel ashamed because my teacher is younger than me. You don't think that I have disgraced the Wang family because of this, do you? Shut up. Hearing his grandson's bluntness, Wang Zhi was so angry that his beard curled up. What do you know? The Duke of Loyalty and Courage is indeed very talented and capable. I don't object to you befriending him and learning from him. But it is completely different to acknowledge him as your teacher. You have also heard of the saying that a teacher for a day is a father for life. This is equivalent to tying you and him together. If one day, when the emperor wants to deal with him, won't you be implicated? Implicated? Grandfather, are you saying that the emperor wants to deal with the Duke of Loyalty and Courage? Wang Si keenly sensed something and asked carefully. Not now. But can't you see that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage's contributions are too great? So great that his contributions are enough to shake the emperor? Let me ask, which emperor in the world would allow someone with greater contributions than himself to exist? It's only a matter of time before we deal with him. Wang Zhi shook his head and said with certainty. What Wang Zhi said was not only what he thought, but also what the other officials thought. Everyone almost unanimously thought that the emperor would deal with Duke Zhongdan sooner or later. He didn't make a move now because there were still too many places that needed to be used. However, once the emperor's position was completely stabilized and his strength increased, how could a mountain contain 2 tigers? It was precisely because of this that many officials did not get too close to Yang Chendong, in case something happened to the loyal and courageous minister in the future. Someone would settle accounts after the autumn and find trouble with them. While everyone was thinking of ways to distance themselves from Yang Chendong, his own grandson had taken him as a teacher. No wonder Wang Zhi was so angry. You haven't done anything to the Duke of Loyalty yet, have you? Besides, your grandson thinks highly of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. When he first entered the capital, I sensed that he wasn't ordinary. Along the way, the facts have proven this. Even the Walla's army was defeated by him. If His Majesty wants to do anything to him, he probably won't be able to get much out of it. If things go wrong, he might even end up injuring himself. If that's the case, your grandson has walked the right path today, taking the initiative before others. Wang Si didn't think much of his grandfather's words. In truth, with his intelligence, He had already analyzed the situation. After analyzing it, he had come to this decision. He believed that one couldn't put all their eggs in one basket. Otherwise, that would be the easiest way to cause problems. Wang Xi's retort left Wang Ji speechless. Only now did he understand that it wasn't that his grandson didn't understand, but that he knew everything, which was why he had come to this decision. Sir, do you know how risky this is? Grandfather, your grandson has thought about it. But as long as your majesty is still on the throne, the Wang clan will be fine, and your grandson will also be fine. Besides, your grandson isn't the only one taking the Duke of Loyalty as his teacher. If your grandson discovers that the Duke of Loyalty isn't as formidable as you imagined, your majesty can use your authority to ground your grandson at any time. If that really happens and the matter gets out, even if something happens to him one day, no one will use this matter to make trouble for our Wang clan. Wang Xi's frank words left Wang Ji completely dumbfounded. He hadn't expected that his grandson, despite his young age, would be able to think of everything. If that was the case, what was there to worry about? As long as he discovered that Yang Chendong wasn't someone who could accomplish great things, he could bring his grandson back. Not only that, he could also tell the outside world that he had sent his grandson to investigate. If things went well, there was a high chance that this would turn into a great achievement. The worst-case scenario was already bearable. Wang Ji did not try to stop his grandson and agreed to it. Now, he was worried that his grandson would be accepted by Yang Chendong because of his relationship with him. If he couldn't enter the Yang Academy, then all of his thoughts would just be a bubble. This night, not only the Wang clan, but many other people were worried about this problem. Even the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Lu Gue, who had sent out undercover agents, was worried. Although the 3 agents he sent out didn't seem to have any relationship with the embroidered uniform guard on the surface, it was true. As long as someone investigated carefully, they could still find some clues. If that was the case, wouldn't Yang Chendong think that he was a little girl and come to find trouble with him? For some reason, when he thought of Yang Chendong's strength, Lu Gui's heart was beating like a drum. This person wasn't someone to be trifled with. Furthermore, he never did business at a loss. At least, Lu Gue had never profited from his dealings with him. Lu Gue was still thinking about how to scheme against Yang Chendong. However, he didn't know that he had already been schemed against by someone else. In the prison of the embroidered uniform guard, the former Jianghu of the embroidered uniform guard, Tang Tong, was sitting on a bamboo mat with a depressed expression. Although it was called a bamboo mat, it was already in tatters. There was only a thin layer of it left. At this moment, it was freezing outside, and the Imperial prison was also very cold. However, even in such an environment, Tang Tong didn't dare to raise any objections. As a former Jianghu, he knew the rules too well. Many times, if you didn't speak or make a sound, you might suffer less because you were forgotten. However, if you insisted on standing up, these jailers wouldn't care about your previous position when they beat you up. He hugged his knees and sat on the ground. His eyes were listless and spiritless. Even when he heard the approaching footsteps, he didn't raise his head. It's time to eat. It was the jailer who gave out the food. When he walked past Tang Tong's room, a slightly moldy and black steamed bun was thrown out and rolled to his feet. This was Tang Tong's dinner. If it was outside, other than a beggar, it would probably be very difficult to attract anyone's attention. However, in the Imperial prison, it was a good thing that could save lives and keep them alive. He was indeed a little hungry, but this black steamed bun really couldn't arouse his appetite. At this moment, he couldn't help but hate his choice. Why did he believe that Ji Ning had to stay in the capital? If he had made another choice at that time and followed Chao Jixiang to Nanjing, perhaps it would have been a different scene. He sighed in his heart and reached out to take the black steamed bun. Then, he put it into his mouth with a hopeless expression. After taking a bite, the gloomy Tang Tong was still regretting his choice. However, after chewing a few times, his expression suddenly froze. Subsequently, his eyes widened as he vigilantly scanned his surroundings. When he saw that no one was paying attention to him, he carefully spat out the steamed bun that he had swallowed into his hands. Then, he saw a small piece of paper that was sandwiched between his hands. There was actually a piece of paper in his steamed bun. From the looks of it, there seemed to be writing on it. Tang Tong's heart thumped. He didn't believe that this was caused by the chef's carelessness. His intuition told him that someone must be sending him a message. But who could send him a message? He was now almost a cripple. Who would think of him? And who would have such great ability to avoid the jailers and bribe them to send him a message? How much power did this person have? With all kinds of questions, Tang Tong carefully opened the paper in his hand. Immediately, 3 lines of small words entered his eyes. At this moment, his breathing began to quicken, and soon, his eyes were filled with tears. Duke of Loyalty. It's actually the Duke of Loyalty. Yes, only he would be willing to use silver. He also has so much silver to do whatever he wants in the Imperial prison. Thinking so in his heart, he quickly digested the contents of the paper. Not long after, his face began to change greatly. Then, his expression slowly calmed down. After a while, his heartbeat calmed down and his emotions calmed down. Tang Tong put the paper back into his mouth and swallowed it. Then, he stood up and held the iron cage with both hands and shouted outside. Come, I want to see Ji Qian. I have something important to report. Today was the day of the Yang Family Academy's enrollment. In the morning, there were many people gathered outside the Yang family manor. Although it couldn't compare to the Xiaotsai, High Scholar, and Jianxia. But for many people, if they could enter the Yang Family Academy, it would be a fresh start in their lives. When most people had gathered and the sun slowly rose, a group of people walked out of the Yang family manor. They held a list written in red words in their hands. Under everyone's gaze, they pasted it horizontally at the entrance of the Yang Family Academy. A total of 100 names appeared in front of everyone's eyes. When the list was posted, it immediately attracted many people to rush over and look up at the bottom of the list. There was only a 1/5 acceptance rate, and it was the early acceptance rate. Naturally, most people left with a face full of disappointment. But at the same time, there were some people who were excited. They had been chosen. In the eyes of these people, there were some who were excited, and some who were even arrogant and condescending. Chapter 248. Yongding Gate of the Capital. This gate was one of the closest outer gates of the capital to the Yang village. At this moment, 2 women were surrounded by several burly men. From the looks of it, they were completely surrounded, which attracted many commoners entering and leaving the city to watch. Big Sister E, it's my fault. I'll stay here. You should leave first. Don't ruin things. The petite woman said to the woman who was clearly half a head taller than her with a face full of grief and indignation. Her face was filled with anxiety and concern. He looked at the tall woman. Although she seemed to be in a hurry, she stood there with her legs like pillars. She didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Little Sister Ping, how can Big Sister leave you alone? Besides, didn't you persuade me as well? The Yang Clan Academy and Dong Shui won't accept a girl as a disciple. I have no hope at all. Since that's the case, what difference does it make whether I look at the list or not? On the other hand, Yu Xiong's grandfather is the current Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue. He's a favorite of the Emperor. If I offend him, I'll be in big trouble. The woman who spoke was Tai Qingyi. She used to be an escort and was nicknamed Iron Face Benevolent Heart by the people of the Jianghu. 3 days ago, she applied to the Yang Clan Academy. The girl beside her was called Jiang Ping. She was her sworn sister of the opposite sex. The 2 of them used to be escorts together. Later, Tai Qingyi made a mistake and was fired from the escort agency. She followed her out. In desperation, she thought of applying to the Yang Clan Academy. In the Jianghu, the name of Dong Shui was equally well known. Although they didn't have much hope, they wouldn't lose anything by giving it a try, right? Today was supposed to be the day of the announcement, so the 2 girls were going to the Yang Academy 15 li south of the city to take a look. However, because they were in a hurry, they weren't careful when they walked. Coincidentally, they bumped into Yu Xiong, who was riding a horse at the city gate, and almost frightened his horse. Although they were saved by the Yu family servants, Yu Xiong was a young master and relied on his grandfather's high status and power. How could he suffer such a loss? He immediately demanded compensation from Jiang Ping. Then when he saw that Jiang Ping and Tai Qingyi were quite pretty, he pestered them even more and refused to let them go. He even ordered his servants to surround them tightly. From the looks of it, he was clearly going to take them away and do something improper. When Tai Qingyi refused to leave, Jiang Ping became even more anxious. She was afraid that she would delay her sister's important matter. When she looked at Yu Xiong, who was riding on the horse with his head held high, she blurted out, "Young Master Yu, please let my sister go first. She has already applied for the Yang Family Academy. This time, she is going to look at the roll of pills. If she delays her important matter, can you bear the consequences?" Jiang Ping wanted to use the Dong Shui to suppress Yu Xiong. This was also based on the rules of nobility. After all, whether it was the name of the Dong Shui or the name of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, it was far from being comparable to a little young master who only knew how to rely on his family. There was nothing wrong with Jiang Ping's strategy, but she neglected a problem. Yu Xiong was a hedonistic young master. When he did things, he would rarely use his brain. If the person in front of him was Yang Chendong, perhaps he would retreat. However, how could the name of the Dong Shui scare him? Not to mention, at home, he had heard his grandfather unintentionally mention that there were still many scholars in the world who were against the Yang Family Academy. Thus, he was even more fearless. "Oh, is that so? Then you are already a member of the Yang Family Academy?" Yu Xiong chuckled and said with a playful expression. Not yet." Jiang Ping shook her head with a very honest attitude. "Since you are not, how can you use the name of the Yang Family Academy? Besides, even if you are really a member of the Yang Family Academy, you have to give this young master an explanation for startling this young master's horse, right? People always have to be reasonable." "Haha, someone come, bring the two of them back. This young master wants to properly interrogate and investigate." A trace of urgency appeared on his face, showing that at this moment, Yu Xiong's brain was already filled with lust and he could not wait any longer. "What are you doing?" Seeing the numerous Yu family retainers closing in on the two of them, Tai Ching-yi asked with a steely expression. She already had a premonition that something was going to happen, and with her skills, she was not very afraid. However, she was worried that if she really made a move here, in the capital, wouldn't she be committing a crime? If that was the case, there would be no place for her in this vast world. "What are we doing? Bring you back." The surrounding Yu family servants, seeing that their young master had given the order, how could they still be polite? Each of them laughed sinisterly and began to walk closer with large strides. These people had been following Yu Xiong for a few years and were very clear about their young master's temperament. Since these two women had been bumped into, they would definitely not be able to escape from the devil's claws. Moreover, not long after, when he was tired of playing with them, he would reward them. Looking at the two of them, the servants could not help but have a good time. 7 to 8 servants surrounded them in a circle. Seeing that they were getting closer and closer, Tai Ching-yi had no choice but to clench her fists in order to protect herself. From the looks of it, it was obvious that a fight was going to break out at any moment. As for what would happen after a fight, it would be a matter of taking one step at a time. The surrounding commoners, seeing that a fight was about to break out, were all worried for the two women. However, their words carried little weight, so they did not dare to act rashly. Otherwise, not only would they not be able to save the two women, they might even get themselves into trouble. However, even if some people were afraid, there were still some who were not. Seeing that the burly servants were about to surround the two women and capture them like eagles catching chicks, a shout came from outside the crowd. "Stop!" As the voice fell, it attracted the attention of the commoners in the crowd. Then, a man dressed in brocade strode over under the protection of two servants. As he walked, the middle-aged man said with a face full of anger, "In broad daylight, the world is clear and bright, and in the capital, what are you people trying to do? Even if you have broken the law, the yamen will judge. It's not up to you to privately punish, is it?" The man's face was full of righteousness, and his words were reasonable. The servants actually forgot to take action and looked at each other. They were clearly shocked by the man's imposing manner. "Who are you?" Yu Xiong said with an unhappy expression. Just as the prey was about to fall into his hands, a troublemaker suddenly appeared. No one would be in a good mood. "And who are you?" In the face of Yu Xiong's arrogant question, the righteous man smiled. His name, Yang, had spread throughout the capital, and there weren't many people who didn't know his name. It was no wonder he had a playful smile on his face when he ran into a hothead who didn't know his identity. As Yang Chendong's fourth brother, his influence had recently flourished. Anyone who knew his identity, which one of them didn't give him enough face? He had face in front of outsiders, and he could enter and leave the immortal abode whenever he wanted. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he only needed to say that he was going to pay the bill and he could leave. How comfortable was this kind of life? All of this had been brought about by his sixth brother, and Xianxia was very clear on this point. It was precisely because of this that he attached great importance to anything related to his sixth brother. When he found out that the Yang clan's academy was opening its enrollment today, he wanted to go and congratulate them. But he hadn't expected to run into such a situation at the city gates. Seeing that Yu Xiong was clearly bullying the weak, Xianxia felt indignant in his heart. Thus, he shouted loudly and stepped forward. He originally thought that since he had only startled the horse and hadn't injured anyone, the other party would definitely give him face. But unexpectedly, the other party didn't recognize him, and he couldn't help but laugh heartily. This young master is surnamed Yang, the fourth young master of the Yang clan. You'd better remember this well. Yang took the initiative to announce his name, hoping to turn the matter into a small one. Since he had already revealed his identity, as long as the other party knew how to do things properly, they would definitely give him face. In return, he would remember this person and return this favor sooner or later. Ah, you're the fourth brother of the East Marshal. We're applying to enter the Yang Clan Academy. We were originally going to look at the rankings today, but we ended up startling the horse in our haste. Fortunately, nothing happened. Jiang Ping was overjoyed when she heard Yang announce his identity. Now that the Yang family had come, it seemed like nothing would happen today. Wait a moment. What do you mean nothing happened? I was so scared that my heart almost jumped out. I must have suffered some internal injuries, so you must come back with me. Once this young master finds a doctor and confirms that I'm fine, I'll let you go. Just when Jiang Ping thought that there was nothing to worry about, Yu Xiong suddenly spoke and used his injury as an excuse to bring Jiang Ping and Tai Qingyi back to the residence. From the beginning to the end, Yu Xiong was talking to Jiang Ping and didn't even look at Xianxia, as if he was invisible. But in fact, he had his own little plans and ideas. Xianxia, the fourth young master of the Yang clan, Yang Chendong's fourth elder brother. It was said that they had a good relationship. How could Yu Xiong not have heard of this? But because of the difference in age, the two didn't have much interaction and didn't know each other. Originally, everyone minded their own business. Yang Chendong was powerful and had done a lot of big things in a short period of time. He was seen as a rising star. But how could the Yu clan be bullied so easily? The Minister of Justice was in charge of all punishments in the world. His power was unimaginable. Even if it was Yang Chendong, if he offended the Yu clan, it would be very difficult for him and he would have to be careful. Of course, there was no need to make enemies. Yu Xiong was clear about this. Thinking himself clever, he didn't even look at Xianxia. Instead, he stared at Jiang Ping and spoke. Chapter 249. When Xianxia heard from Jiang Ping that they had applied for his sixth brother's Yang Clan Academy, he felt relieved. Since this matter concerned his sixth brother, he had to get involved. However, when he raised his head and saw that Yu Xiong didn't even look at him, he immediately became angry. Brat, this young master is talking to you. Did you hear me? This young master is Yu Xiong. I'm sure fourth young master has heard of me. Today's matter has nothing to do with you, so it's best if you don't interfere. Men, arrest these two women who tried to harm this young master and bring them back for interrogation. Yu Xiong originally didn't want to talk to Xianxia in order not to cause a conflict between the two clans. However, seeing that the other party didn't recognize him, he immediately revealed his identity and advised him not to meddle in other people's business. Otherwise, he would only be losing face. Although Yu Xiong's words were ear-piercing to Xianxia's ears, he felt somewhat helpless. He had naturally heard of Yu Xiong's name. After all, there were only a few high-ranking young masters in the capital. As long as one paid attention, they would know a little. As someone who had been in the capital for several decades, how could Xianxia not know? Usually, everyone really had the idea of minding their own business. But if they really met face-to-face one day, they would just greet each other and it would be over. This was because the Yu clan wasn't to be trifled with. However, he didn't ask about the other party's identity before stepping forward. Now that he knew the other party's identity, if this matter were to spread, wouldn't people think that he was a person who bullied the weak and feared the strong? More importantly, This matter involved the students of the Yang Clan Academy. Although he didn't know if they were accepted, it was related to his sixth brother. If he shrank back now, it wouldn't be easy for him to deal with his sixth brother. The Yu clan wasn't to be trifled with, but he couldn't ignore this matter either. Thus, Yang was caught in a dilemma. More importantly, if he were to make a move now, he would be at a disadvantage since he only had 2 servants with him. If he were to be beaten up, even if he managed to regain his face later, it would still be a humiliating matter. Yang was caught in a dilemma and didn't know whether to advance or retreat. For a moment, he didn't say anything. When Yu Xiong saw this, he was naturally overjoyed. Thinking that the other party was afraid of his identity, he became even bolder and shouted at his servants, "What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?" Since their master had given the order, the 8 servants no longer held back. They surrounded the 2 women and stretched out their arms to grab them. "Sister, what should we do?" Jiang Ping saw that the other party had made a move. If she didn't retaliate, then her power would be tied up tightly. Then, she really didn't know what her fate would be. "Let's do it. Let's fight first and talk later." A look of determination flashed across Tai Chingy's face. She naturally knew what the consequences would be if she fought back. However, he had no other choice at this time. He couldn't just let the other party take action and allow himself to be captured. After Tai Chingy finished speaking, she took half a step back and dodged a big hand in front of her. Then she punched the man's elbow. The strong and precise force made the servant cry out in pain and retreat. He is actually a martial artist. When the others saw Tai Chingy's counterattack, they couldn't help but applaud. The commoners, who originally thought that things were not going well, were already prepared to complain about the 2 women's miserable fate. However, they didn't expect that the 2 women's skills were good and their counterattack was so sharp. This counterattack also fell into Yang's eyes. His originally gloomy expression became much livelier in an instant. Good job. As long as the 2 of you can rush out, I will wait for you in front and go with you to the Yang family manor to clarify things." Yang only brought 2 servants, afraid that they would be a burden to Tai Chingy. After saying this, he turned and walked towards the city gate of Yongding City. Originally, they didn't know what the result would be after fighting, but Yang's words pointed them in the right direction. At this moment, the 2 women didn't hesitate and used both their hands and feet to dodge the Yu family servants who came rushing over. Tai Chingy's skills were good. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been chosen by Yang Chendong among the 500 people. It wasn't a problem to deal with 8 boorish men who relied on their status and background. With the help of her sister, Jiang Ping, after just a few dozen moves, the 8 Yu family servants fell to the ground and wailed in pain. Yu Xiong was also frightened and retreated, hiding in the crowd. No one came to stop them. Tai Chingy shouted to Jiang Ping, "Let's go quickly." The 2 of them quickly disappeared from the city gate. From the beginning to the end, the people from the warden's office of the 5 cities didn't appear. That was because they knew that Yu Xiong was about to do something bad. They were afraid that their appearance would delay his good deed. So of course, they would hide as far as possible. Unexpectedly in the end, it helped Tai Chingy and Jiang Ping. When Yu Xiong saw that his servants were beaten to the ground, he was afraid that the 2 women would take revenge on him. Naturally, he rode his horse and hid far away. After seeing the 2 women escape, he returned to his original arrogant appearance and shouted loudly, "Where are the soldiers? Is no one coming to deal with the beating?" Outside the city, Yang had only just arrived when Tai Chingy and Jiang Ping rushed over from afar. Looking at the 2 girls, he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "Good skills. 4th brother is a person who loves talents. I'm sure that after knowing how powerful you are, he will accept you as a student of the academy. How about this? Follow me first." Yang Family Village. At the gate of the Yang Family Academy, some people were happy and some were sad. But no matter what kind of mood they had, the facts couldn't be changed. Many people left in disappointment, while some happily took things that could prove their identity and stepped into the academy. Last time, they only came to the outer courtyard of the academy. There, they were stunned by the 2 pressure wells that they had never seen before. But when they entered the inner courtyard of the academy, the spacious school building made of cement and the classrooms with expensive glass windows appeared in front of them. Especially the row of neatly arranged dormitories. It was said that they were specially prepared for students. There was even a canteen for eating, a laundry room for washing clothes, and some cold fitness equipment that they had never seen before. But at this moment, they felt so warm and considerate. After entering the inner courtyard of the Yang Family Academy, the words moral, intelligence, physique, beauty, and work, and science and technology is the #1 productivity were sprayed on the walls, giving people a feeling of vitality and freshness. Everyone only knew a little about these phrases that they had never heard of before, but they could vaguely understand them. Everyone couldn't help but feel a sense of longing for the future. Inside the academy, there were already people in charge of receiving people. Any student who was accepted would receive a special room and a certain number of meal tickets. According to the staff, after coming here, they had to rely on themselves. No one was allowed to bring servants, and they had to rely on themselves for food, clothing, housing, and transportation. No one dared to go against this requirement. First, the number of young masters who could be accepted was limited. They were in the minority among the 100 people and couldn't cause any trouble. Second, the rules were written very clearly. Every student had 100 points of conduct. Once all of their points were deducted, that would be the time they had to leave. The rules also wrote that no matter what the reason was, if one didn't follow the rules of the academy, at least 2 points would be deducted. If one was the leader and the situation was serious, they might be directly expelled. Since it was written in the rules, it was a hard rule that no one dared to go against. So even though they were somewhat unwilling, no one raised any objections. Some of the young masters, including Wuxia, took the initiative to send their servants out of the academy. They also told them to tell their families that there would be a day off every 7 days in the academy. At that time, they would naturally go home to take a look. The people who were accepted received their plates one by one. Then, under the guidance of the staff, they first received their own bedding, meal tickets, and other daily necessities. Then, they were led to their respective rooms. According to these people, before lunch, the academy's principal, who was also the loyalty guild, would speak to them. At that time, the real life of a student would begin. And before that, everyone could temporarily relax and properly rest in their rooms. Although they didn't know what the real life of a student was, seeing how determined the staff was, they felt the pressure and cherished the short time they could rest before the official start. In the principal's office, Yang Qindong was listening to Tiger's Mane's work report. Young master, after the announcement, there are 100 students who should have arrived. There are 98 who actually arrived. Please give us your instructions. There are 2 who didn't arrive? Who are they? Yang Qindong asked with a puzzled expression. This time, the people who signed up were all willing. Since they had the opportunity, why didn't they appear? His intuition told him that something unexpected must have happened. Reporting to the 6th young master, they are Tai Qingyi and her sworn sister, Jiang Ping. Tiger's Mane scratched his head, also confused. If it were someone else it would be fine. Perhaps they would be obstructed by their family or even friends and change their minds at the last minute. But these 2 people had been seriously investigated. After losing their job as escorts, they had nowhere else to go. How could they not report after being accepted? It's them? After hearing the answer, Yang Qindong's face showed a trace of seriousness. Obviously, he had also thought of what Tiger's Mane thought. But soon, he shook his head and said, there is no reason for them to not appear after being accepted. If there is a possibility, then there is only one. They must have met with an accident. How about this? Arrange for the security bureau to investigate. Chapter 250. As soon as Yang Qindong finished speaking, Beta Persei's rough voice came from outside the door. Young master, Xianxia is here. He said he has something urgent to report. Let him in. After Yang Qindong nodded, the door was pushed open from the outside. Xianxia, wearing a pure cotton robe, walked in. Young master, 4th master is here. He also brought 2 girls with him. Behind them are some soldiers from the warden's office. What's going on? Hu Mang saw that Xia's words were a little out of place, so as their leader, he asked, what do you think? Shaking his head, Xianxia also had a puzzled look on his face. Obviously, he also did not understand what was going on. Yang Qindong, on the other hand, had already stood up and said, whether it's a blessing or a curse, we'll deal with it accordingly. How about this? Immediately gather all the students. This young master will use this matter to teach everyone a lesson. With Yang Chendong's instructions, soon, a sharp whistle sounded. Soon, the 98 students who had entered the room hurriedly rushed out. They were familiarizing themselves with the rules of the academy, and one of them was to obey orders and follow instructions. One of the instructions was that everyone had to gather when the whistle sounded. No matter what you were doing, whether it was sleeping, eating, or urinating, you had to stop and gather. Otherwise, depending on the severity of the situation, you would be deducted more than 2 to 10 points. There was a total of 100 points, and no one wanted to be deducted just like that. Therefore, after hearing the whistle, whether it was the ordinary people or the young master, they all rushed out of the room at the first moment. The 98 people stood in a row according to their positions from the first to the last. Just as they were seated, Yang Chendong, wearing a green cotton robe, appeared in front of everyone under the protection of Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei. All right, since you're all here, follow me out to watch the fun. As a student of the Yang Academy, the first thing they had to have was courage. In the future, Yang Chendong would have many examples to prove their courage. With Yang Chendong as the leader and the other students as support, a group of more than 100 people walked out of the Yang Academy. When they arrived at the gate, they saw Yang Chendong, 2 servants, Tai Qingyi, and Jiang Ping confronting dozens of soldiers from the 5 cities' warden's office. As soon as the group of more than 100 people walked out, they attracted the attention of these 2 groups. When he saw that the leader was the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Chendong, Yang Yang's originally tense face relaxed a lot. 6th brother, I'm here. 4th brother. Seeing Yang Yang waving his hand at him, Yang Chendong, who originally had a confident face, had a hint of warmth in his eyes. Those who knew him knew that he would only show such a kind look to his family and the people he cared about. 6th brother, I'm afraid I've caused you trouble this time. Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with self-blame as he watched Yang Chendong walk closer and closer. 4th brother, you don't have to say that. You and I are brothers. Your business is naturally my business. What's going on? Yang Chendong said as he casually glanced at the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office. With just a glance, the dozens of soldiers on the opposite side quickly lowered their heads. After the 2 consecutive defeats against Tile, there was no one who didn't know about Yang Chendong. There was no one who didn't know about the military god. It was because of the war god's existence that not only did they not suffer any casualties, but they also made a lot of military achievements and gained a lot of benefits. Some of the soldiers' living conditions improved by more than a level, and all of this was thanks to Yang Chendong. For this reason, many soldiers' families also quietly set up a longevity memorial arch for Yang Chendong in order to express their gratitude in their hearts. But now, they wanted to cause trouble for him. It was no wonder these people didn't dare to look Yang Chendong in the eye. These people lowered their heads, and Yang Chendong withdrew his cold gaze. He then looked at Yang Yang and said, 4th brother, what's going on? Why are they following you? Sai, let the 2 of them explain. Yang Yang didn't know how to explain it, so he left it to Lang Qingyi and Jiang Ping. Yang Chendong had already noticed the 2 of them, but the difference in status was too great, so he didn't say anything. Now that his 4th brother pointed out the 2 of them, he used the momentum to look at them and said with an encouraging gaze, Speak, what's going on? Greetings. Dong Shuai. Tai Qingyi and Jiang Ping were excited to see their idol standing in front of them, so they bowed and greeted him. Then, Jiang Ping, who was more eloquent, explained the whole sequence of events to him. When Tiger's Mane heard that the matter involved Yu Xiong, the grandson of the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue, he signaled to one of his subordinates behind him, and the subordinate quickly disappeared. Soon, a note was brought over, and Tiger's Mane handed it to Yang Chendong. The note recorded some things about Yu Xiong, but because he wasn't a big shot, the record wasn't very detailed. There were only a few words. Yu Xiong, the 3rd of the brothers. Characteristics. There's nothing he doesn't know about eating, drinking, and having fun. He often deceives others. Once, in order to get a woman, he forced her husband to write a divorce letter and escape far away from home to protect himself. When he saw this, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with coldness. Tell everyone to find the person. Understood. Tiger's Mane had enough chemistry with Yang Chendong, so he naturally knew who he was referring to. At this moment, Jiang Ping also explained the cause and effect of the matter. Then, she and Tai Qingyi looked at Yang Chendong. Although they didn't say anything, They knew very well that if Dong Shuai didn't care about them, they would be taken away by the 5 cities warden's office for punishment. In fact, it wasn't just Tai Qingyi. Fourth brother Yang Chendong and the 98 new students of the Yang Academy were all looking at Yang Chendong, the dean of their academy. When Jiang Ping explained the cause and effect of the matter, they heard everything clearly, so they were naturally angry at Yu Xiong's actions. He just accidentally startled the horse and didn't cause any harm. Either he compensate you with some silver, or he apologize in front of everyone and admit his mistake. Why did he have to take people away and do such a beastly thing? This was really going too far. Especially some of the students who were originally from poor families, they had encountered such things in the past. Through this matter, it was as if he had seen himself in the past. Naturally, he felt like he had a common enemy. Sensing the rising anger around him, Yang Chendong calmly turned around and looked at everyone, including Tai Qingyi and the other 2 women. He said, I originally planned to gather everyone for a talk before lunch. Since there is such an opportunity, I will tell you in advance. The matter involved the Yang Academy, so all the students naturally put up their earphones. This was the first time they heard the dean speak, so of course they were very careful. Seeing that everyone was so serious, Yang Chendong nodded with satisfaction. He appreciated such an attitude. Since that was the case, he wouldn't be stingy with his words. Very good. Since everyone is able to enter the Yang Family Academy, it proves that everyone has a kind of fate. Although I can't guarantee that everyone will become the first batch of students of the academy, I will teach you with all my heart as long as you are here. The first lesson I will teach you today is the word, righteousness. What is righteousness? It refers to the atmosphere of righteousness and spreading positive energy. Righteousness is a type of positive energy that is reflected in the righteousness of people. Righteousness is to walk the right path. It is to be filled with positive, righteous atmosphere. With a powerful voice, Yang Chendong continued, people who live between heaven and earth must be indomitable and have righteousness in their bodies. Only then, no matter what situation you are in, can you hold your head high and be respected by others. As long as you have righteousness in your heart, you can do things with a clear conscience. Only then can you face any difficulties and problems and solve them. Today, Tai Qingyi and Jiang Ping only walked a little too fast because they were anxious and didn't hurt anyone. This was originally a trivial matter, but some people always thought that they were cut above others, always thinking that they could do whatever they wanted. Thus, they took the opportunity to create trouble, wanting to use extreme means to achieve extreme goals. This is the embodiment of not having righteousness. At the same time, it is also because there are too few people with righteousness that these people can survive and do whatever they want on the streets. I don't know if everyone has thought about it, but if everyone has righteousness in their hearts and can stand up to criticize Yu Xiong, what kind of scene would that be? Presumably, from then on, there will be no place for evil people in the world, and there will be fewer and fewer unjust things in the world, right? Therefore, in the first lesson, I will talk about the understanding of righteousness and the use of righteousness. At the same time, I will ask everyone to have righteousness. Not only must you have righteousness, but you must spread it to others. One day, when everyone has righteousness, then the world will be peaceful and the people will be prosperous. I look forward to the arrival of that day. Good. As soon as Yang Chendong finished his words, the crowd, led by Wang Si, began to cheer loudly. Waves of warm applause followed. Seeing that everyone agreed with his point of view, Yang Chendong smiled at everyone in satisfaction. Then, he turned to Tai Qingyi and Jiang Ping. The 2 of you have been accepted by the Yang Academy. Your names are on the list. Now, please enter the academy to collect your things and understand the relevant rules. Chapter 251. Tai Qingyi and the other girl, who were originally very excited by the righteous words, showed joy and excitement when they heard Yang Chendong say that they were accepted. They immediately agreed happily. Just as they were about to enter the academy, they remembered that the people from the 5 cities warden's office were right in front of them. If they couldn't solve this problem, how could they study in peace in the academy? Noticing that the 2 girls' footsteps were a little hesitant, Yang Chendong nodded lightly. These 2 had not been blinded by the joy in front of them, so it could be seen that they were still very rational. After his good impression of the 2 girls improved a little, Yang Chendong suddenly turned to the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office 30 steps away and said, I presume you all know this duke? Yes, We greet the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. After being asked by Yang Chendong, these people did not dare to pretend to be deaf and mute. They immediately lowered their heads and said respectfully, "Very good, since you know this Duke, you can go back. If Yu Xiong asks, just say that the two of them are students of the Yang Academy. If you want to talk about it, just talk to this Duke. Of course, if you want to catch people, you can catch this Duke first, understand?" The more he spoke, the more serious Yang Chendong's expression became. This seriousness also caused the expressions of the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office to change greatly. They repeatedly said that they did not dare and then turned to leave very decisively. What kind of joke was this? If they wanted to catch people, they would first catch Yang Chendong. Even if they had the courage, they would not dare to do this. If they really did it, not to mention whether they could do it or not, when they really returned home, their wives would not let them go. Their consciences would not be able to live with themselves. The soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office left because of Yang Chendong's words. They left so happily without a trace of reluctance. This made all the students very excited after seeing this. This was their dean. He had righteousness in his heart and was not afraid of any powerful people. They did not know when they would be able to be like this, facing all difficulties with one word and solving them with one word. A crisis was thus resolved. The 100 students all returned to their positions and walked towards the Yang Clan Academy. Yang Chendong came to Yang Chendong's side and asked with concern, "Sixth brother, will there be any trouble?" "What kind of trouble? We weren't in the wrong to begin with. It was all that Yu Xiong's fault. It was just a child's mischief. It wasn't a big deal. This time, I really have to thank fourth brother. If you hadn't appeared in time, I'm afraid that things would have gotten out of hand. At that time, it would have been much more troublesome to solve." "Hee, why don't we enter the courtyard and have a drink together?" Yang Chendong chuckled. Hearing that not only was there no mistake, but there was also merit, Yang Yang's high-hanging heart could finally settle down. Good. It's rare for sixth brother to be so considerate. Fourth brother will drink with you. Hee, let me try your delicious food. Yang Yang's heart was clear. Everyone said that all the delicacies in the world were in the immortal abode. Actually, that was not the case. The delicacies of the Yang family manor were the ones that were on a whole new level. At that moment, the two brothers chatted and laughed as they walked towards the inner courtyard of the Yang family manor. Just as they arrived at the entrance, a beautiful girl blocked their path. "Dong Shuai, I also want to enter the Yang Clan Academy to study." The person who came was Junko. She had just witnessed everything that happened at the entrance of the academy, and heard Yang Chendong's understanding of the word morality. While she was excited, she also believed that the academy must be a very mysterious place. She would definitely be able to learn a lot there. Therefore, she decided to recommend herself and asked to enter the academy as a student. In order to achieve this goal, Junko was prepared to be rejected. She used her seemingly weak body to block in front of Yang Chendong. She looked as if she would not let him pass if he did not agree. In the entire Yang family manor, there were not many people who dared to do this. Other than the few matriarchs, no one else would do this. Otherwise, the consequences would definitely make you regret it for the rest of your life. Junko was a beautiful girl. Perhaps this was her advantage. She used her body to block in front of Yang Chendong. She had no intention of letting him pass. "Cough, sixth brother, I will go in first. I can already smell the wine. Ha. Yang Chendong said tactfully. He knew that if he continued to stay here, it would only make things awkward for Yang Chendong. Therefore, he found an excuse and took the lead to walk into the inner courtyard of the Yang family manor. "You guys go in too." Yang Chendong looked at Tiger's mane, who was still standing beside him. He only turned his head to the side. At this time, he was not alert at all. Yang Chendong shook his head and said aloud, "Yes, young master." Tiger's mane couldn't wait to leave. After answering, he strode away. At the same time, the first guard, Chiu Vi, and the others followed behind him. Soon, only Yang Chendong and Junko were left. He finally asked, "Why did you decide to study in the Yang family academy? Your bodyguard's body is fine. It should be time for you to leave." "No, I'm not leaving." Junko shook her head and said firmly. "Reason?" Yang Chendong's tone was cold as he asked. "Reason?" Junko's beautiful big eyes turned and said, I admire the culture of the great Ming dynasty. It's that simple to learn the advanced knowledge here. Then after you learn it, go back and spread it to Japan? Yang Chendong seemed to be very specific. Yes. Junko didn't want to admit it, but she didn't know why. In front of Yang Chendong, she told him the truth. Perhaps she also knew that she couldn't lie to him with her strength. You're very honest. Yang Chendong first approved of Junko's attitude, but then he said, but why should I accept you? What's in it for me to take you in? This. Junko's eyes kept blinking. At this moment, she really wanted to tell Yang Chendong that she was the princess of Japan, but she was worried that once he knew her identity, Yang Chendong would report this matter to the Imperial court of the Great Ming dynasty. In that case, things would be a little troublesome. This was not what she wanted. If she couldn't use her identity to pressure him, then she could only use money. Junko said, I can give you a lot of gold and silver. Give me a number. A lot of gold and silver. You should have some understanding of me these days. You should know that I am not short of money. In fact, I have a lot of money. Yang Chendong didn't seem to agree with Junko's reason. When she said this, Junko's face turned pale. That's right, Yang Chendong might not be the richest person in the Great Ming dynasty, but if they were to talk about who was the best at making money, no one would dare to say they were the best if Yang Chendong claimed to be second. Junko's face was still changing. On the other side, Yang Chendong had already opened his mouth and said, but who would dislike money? Since you want me to give you a price, I will give you 10,000 taels a day to study with me. What? Even though she had made some preparations and was even waiting for Yang Chendong to ask for an exorbitant price, she was still extremely shocked when she heard that it was 10,000 taels of silver a day. Her cherry lips opened so wide that she could swallow a pigeon egg. Isn't this too much? But you asked me to give you a price. Yang Chendong's face didn't change, but he was laughing in his heart. He seemed to like the feeling of teasing Junko. I asked you to give me a price, but 10,000 taels a day is still too expensive. I can't afford it. Junko had the support of the Japanese royal family. Naturally, she didn't lack money since she was a child. But 10,000 taels a day still scared her. Because even if the entire royal family added up all their expenses, they wouldn't be able to reach this amount in a day. If she reported the amount of money back to her country, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to get through her father's trial. Seeing Junko being so honest and saying that she couldn't afford it, Yang Chendong had to shake his head and said, then there is no other way. You asked me to give you a price, but you can't afford it. You might as well not go to the academy to study. After saying that, Yang Chendong was about to leave, but Junko still stood in front of him, blocking his way. So 1,000 taels a day. This is already the limit I can pay. As if she had made up her mind, Junko said these words with great effort, and her face was extremely serious. 1,000 taels a day in a month, it would be more than 30,000 taels. This was Junzi. Before she came to the Great Ming dynasty, her father gave her a lot of good things, and some of them were even prepared for her future dowry. If it were other people, they wouldn't even dare to say such words. 1,000 taels a day, it seems to be a lot. Okay, it's a deal. But I'll say the ugly words first. As soon as you enter the academy, you have to listen to me. If you can't bear the hardships and take the initiative to withdraw, then don't come looking for trouble. Yang Chendong originally wanted to scare Junko. If he wanted to use this person, even if she didn't pay him a single tael, he would still agree. He just deliberately delayed it. But he didn't expect that there would be an unexpected gain. 1,000 taels a day was naturally nothing for him. But if there was money to be earned, then he would be a fool. No problem, I won't withdraw. I will stick to it. Thank you, Dong Shuai. Finally getting what she wanted, Junko's face was full of joy. She then turned around and walked away happily. She even seemed to be humming a famous Japanese song. Yang Chendong was a capable person, and a very capable one at that. If such a person could be used by the emperor, he would definitely become the most powerful arm. At this moment, if he stayed here, it meant that he had more opportunities to come into contact with Yang Chendong, and the possibility of recruiting him for his own use would naturally increase. Although Yang Chendong was already the loyal duke, and the hope was not great, at least there was hope, right? Chapter 252. The Yamen of the Five Cities Warden's Office. The people who had gone to Yang Chendong's manor had rushed back and clearly explained the intentions of the loyal Duke Yang Chendong. Commander Sun Tong, who was on duty, said to Yu Xiong with a serious expression, "Young Master Yu, you have heard the matter. We are powerless to do anything. Please go back." Yu Xiong's expression was naturally somewhat ugly at this moment. He had thought that his grandfather was the current Minister of Justice and that no one would dare to not give him face. In the past, he had also done some outrageous things, but in the end, nothing had happened. He had eaten and drank as he should. But today, after meeting Yang Chendong, everything had changed. The Five Cities Warden's Office had actually spoken to him in such a state. It was clear that they did not want to interfere. "Very good, Commander Sun, right? Your attitude of shirking responsibility is very bad. I will report this to your superior, and I will also tell my grandfather," Yu Xiong said with a fierce expression. He had thought that if he brought up his grandfather, Sun Tong would at least be nervous, if not afraid. But instead, he stood there and did not even raise his eyes. On the contrary, he kindly advised him, "Young Master Yu, let me give you a piece of advice. You should first explain this matter to your grandfather before deciding what to do. Otherwise, if you carelessly do something and implicate your entire family, that would be really bad." Sun Tong was only advising him with good intentions. Of course, he did not want to offend the current Minister of Justice. But when Yu Xiong heard these words, his expression changed again and again. He felt that Sun Tong was clearly looking down on him, including his grandfather. He immediately flung his sleeves angrily and left. It could be seen that at this moment, he was very angry. After leaving the Yamen of the Five Cities Warden's Office, Yu Xiong looked at the people walking on the street and swore in his heart that no matter what, he would get back at them today. Wasn't he just a loyal duke who had made some contributions? Although he had a title, which duke, marquis, and count really had great power? In the end, didn't the important officials control everything in the Imperial court? Back then, no matter how awe-inspiring Jianghu was, in the end, didn't he still have to tuck his tail between his legs and behave himself? This Yang Chendong had become a duke at such a young age, yet he didn't want to restrain himself. Instead, he wanted to go against him, so he had to let him know how powerful he was. He thought about how he had many friends in the capital, and he was also quite open-minded and had made friends with people from all walks of life. It shouldn't be a problem for him to teach Yang Chendong a lesson. At this moment, Yu Xiong wanted to kill. Although he did not say that he wanted to kill Yang Chendong, he decided to teach him a lesson and let him know who he could not afford to provoke. But he didn't even think about it. How could someone who could reach this position at the age of 20 be so easy to get along with? Was it appropriate to treat such an opponent as an ordinary playboy? Would it work? Yu Xiong quickly left the Five Cities Warden's office and appeared on a bustling street. Here, he found a big gangster named Lu San. Black and white had existed in all eras. The only difference was which side was more powerful. Lu San was one of the representatives of black. This man had lived in the capital since he was a child, and because he was ruthless and brave enough to only recognize money and not people, he had managed to carve out a small world for himself, becoming a character in the nearby streets. It was rumored that this man had more than 100 subordinates and more than 1,000 ordinary subordinates. Yu Xiong came and sat face to face with Lu San at the table. A large stack of banknotes issued by the Yang Family Bank was placed there. The thick stack was more than 20,000 taels. Looking at the money that was enough for him to risk his life for 2 to 3 years, Lu San's eyes were red. He was like a vicious tiger that had seen its prey and could not control himself. Teach a person a lesson and this is all yours. Seeing Lu San's drooling appearance, Yu Xiong was much more confident. "Okay, please tell me who it is." Money makes the world go round. At this moment, Lu San had a very good explanation. For money, he could even kill his own parents, not to mention dealing with an outsider. East Marshal Yang Chendong. Yu Xiong said his name. The moment Yu Xiong announced his name, Lu San's face twitched violently. He thought that if a high-ranking young master like Yu Xiong was willing to take out so much money for him, it would not be simple. The person he had to deal with would also not be a nameless pawn. But he did not expect it to be the East Marshal. Even ordinary people knew the name of the East Marshal, not to mention people like Lu San who mingled in the underworld. There was even a period of time when he thought of relying on this loyal duke. But later, he was afraid of losing his freedom and gave up on this idea. Now that Yu Xiong said that he wanted to deal with this person, his expression changed greatly. But when he saw the banknotes on the table, he made a decision. As the saying goes, how can one catch a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den? If he wanted to earn money, he had to take risks, especially for people like him who were in the underworld. Young Master Yu, the East Marshal hides in the Yang clan manor every day. It won't be easy to deal with him. From what I know, even the embroidered uniform guards were unable to gain anything from the Yang clan manor. I'm afraid that you don't have to deal with Yang Qindong. You can deal with the people important to him as well. You just have to teach him a lesson. Yu Xiong had thought about it a long time ago. The success rate of causing trouble for the Yang clan manor was too low. Even 20,000 silver wouldn't be enough. It was better to deal with the people close to him, such as the managers of the Immortal Abode, Realm Beyond Heaven, and the Yang Clan Bank. Because of their work, they had to appear in the capital every day. It should be easy to cause trouble for them. All right, it's a deal. Lu San was relieved when he heard that he didn't have to deal with Yang Qindong, but the people close to him as well. If that was the case, there would be too many people to deal with, and the money would be even easier to get. Yu Xiong left. After leaving behind the money, he confidently left. Lu San called over a few of his trusted aides and told them about the deal he had just received. When his trusted aides heard that they wanted to deal with the East Marshal, they became rather nervous. It was clear that they had heard of this man before. But when they heard Lu San say that Yu Xiong was willing to take out 20,000 taels of silver, they immediately threw the danger to the back of their minds. These people were originally people who had their heads on their belts. As long as they were given enough money, other than the current emperor, they would dare to make a move on anyone. With the money to pave the way, they quickly reached an agreement. After much deliberation, they decided to target one of the managers of the Immortal Abode, Madame Shui. Madame Shui was Yang Qindong's third wife, and her status was not low. If something happened to her, Yang Qindong would definitely be heartbroken. If they could persuade her, they would have completed the mission Yu Xiong had set for them. Of course, there was an even more important reason for choosing this person. This person's beauty had made their hearts itch for a long time. If they could capture this person and satisfy their own needs, wouldn't that be killing two birds with one stone? As for how Yang Qindong would deal with them after they succeeded, if worst came to worst, they would just take the money and leave the capital. This wasn't the first time they had done something like this. Moreover, the true mastermind behind the scenes was Yu Xiong. Even if he wanted to make a move, the East Marshal should be dealing with this person. Why would he care about small fries like them? Lu San, who didn't understand Yang Qindong's temperament, believed himself to be a pile of dung, filthy and stinky. People like them, as long as they had some status, wouldn't have too many interactions with them. If something really happened, they would just be chased down by some officials on the surface. They had plenty of ways to deal with soldiers to ensure their own safety. Just like in the past, they had also done things to target nobles, but hadn't they still managed to survive until now? Treating Yang Qindong as an ordinary aristocrat was a mistake that Lu San and the others made in their understanding. What they didn't know was that there were some things that couldn't be done, or even thought about. Otherwise, the consequences would be far beyond what they could bear. Now that they had a common understanding, they began to make preparations. First, they would familiarize themselves with Madame Snow's route, and then they would find a suitable opportunity to strike. As Yang Qindong's third wife, Madame Snow was currently very busy. She was born as a singer, and she had a good singing voice, so she was like a fish in water in the Immortal Abode. Moreover, the world had been peaceful recently, and the Immortal Abode had flourished once more. It had reached a level of prosperity that was hard to come by. The play she and Madame Xiang had written about the war between the war god and the Walla had become even more popular. This success in her career only made Madame Snow love Yang Qindong even more. She would never forget who had given her all of this. For this reason, no matter how busy she was, she would always make a trip back to the Yang clan manor every 3 days just to see her beloved. It was yet another busy day. From the time the Immortal Abode opened in the morning until nightfall, there were no empty seats. Madame Snow also busied herself for the better part of the day. After dinner, she left everything to Madame Xiang. The two of them had long since reached an agreement that unless there was something important, they would return to the Yang clan manor in batches to spend the night. After explaining everything, Madame Snow entered a soft sedan chair. As soon as she entered, she was overcome by fatigue, and before she knew it, she had fallen asleep. The 4 people carrying the sedan chair were all Lung Feng. This was the result of Yang Chendong's cautious personality. Even though the world was at peace, and the Walla had not only retreated, but had also begun to trade with the Great Ming, Dai Zong was also busy training the new army. It seemed like no one would do anything to him, but Yang Chendong was still very protective of his wives. He was well aware that there were some things that he couldn't afford to make a mistake, because a single mistake would leave him with lifelong regret. Chapter 253. There were 4 cold-edge soldiers carrying the palanquin, as well as 6 more to the left and right. This was an entire squad of cold-edge soldiers. Unless 40 to 50 enemies suddenly appeared, their safety was guaranteed. Squad Captain Cheng Qian. He was grateful that the 6th young master had entrusted the task of protecting the 3rd madam to him. This was a form of trust. There were many squad captains in the Cold Edge, but he had been given this assignment. How could he not do his best? Cheng Qian even had a feeling that as long as he did his job well, his future would be limitless. He would be able to lead even more soldiers and win even more battles. This was one of his lifelong wishes. The 3rd madam boarded the palanquin. Cheng Qian said, "Rise." The palanquin lifted off the ground, and the squad of 10 left the immortal abode, slowly making their way toward the Yongding Gate. The moment they left the busiest street of the capital, one of the cold-edge soldiers sensed something and whispered to Cheng Qian, "Squad captain, behind us." Cheng Qian raised his right hand slightly. It was just a simple movement, but Cheng Qian used sign language to tell the soldier that he knew that someone was following him. Given the strength of the cold-edge soldiers, they had sensed that they were being watched not long after leaving the immortal abode. But the other party's methods weren't bad, so they couldn't be sure who was following them. How many were there? Only then did they carefully observe their surroundings. Now that they were on a slightly quieter street, this feeling only grew stronger. There wasn't much time left until the curfew, so the number of people on the street was dwindling. This made it difficult for the people following them to hide themselves perfectly. Cheng Qian sensed it. When he raised his right hand, he saw that besides the 4 soldiers carrying the palanquin, the other 5 soldiers were silently inspecting their weapons and equipment. Although he didn't know who these people were, they were still in the dark. But for the sake of safety, it was never wrong to make preparations in advance. As the squad captain and commander, Cheng Qian had already taken out the 95-style saber wrapped in cloth and removed the safety pin. He also took out the night vision goggles from his satchel and put them on. Not all cold fronts were equipped with such equipment. However, Cheng Qian's squad was tasked with protecting the 3rd madam. Due to the special nature of their mission, they were able to enjoy such treatment. As a result, they had a pair of extremely bright eyes in the dark, allowing them to see everything around them very clearly. It was precisely because they could see everything clearly that those who were following them in the dark had nowhere to hide. When he noticed that there were 4 or 5 people following him, Cheng Qian's breathing quickened and his heartbeat quickened. He couldn't tell if he was excited or worried. They were excited because there was a battle to fight. Their hands had been itching for a while. Now that someone had delivered themselves to their doorstep, of course they would go on a killing spree. What he was worried about was that the 3rd madam was in the sedan. If she lost even a strand of hair, he was afraid that it would be his fault. At that time, he would not have the face to face the 6th young master, and all his future would end today. Regardless of whether he was excited or nervous, after taking a few deep breaths, Cheng Qian calmed his racing heartbeat and tried his best to maintain his best condition. At this moment, not only Cheng Qian, but even the soldiers under his command were quickly making adjustments. During a great battle, one state of mind determined their success or failure. The more relaxed they were, the more they could unleash their strength to their normal level, or even to the extreme. This was proven during their training when they joined the cold front. While Cheng Qian and the 5 soldiers were making preparations before the battle, the 4 cold front members carrying the sedan were also searching for a safe spot. The so-called safe spot was the best place to ensure the 3rd madam's safety. For such a place, it was best to be in a corner. The more hidden it was, the better it was. Generally, a blind spot could reduce the number of points of attack. The best blind spot was when there were 3 walls and only one side would be attacked. Currently, the 4 of them were constantly searching in the dark night. Finally, the four of them resonated at the entrance of a large mansion with the word, Gao, written on it. For such a large and wealthy family, the entrance of the mansion was very sturdy and wide. If they could hide here, the number of points of attack would be very small. After coming to a consensus, the four of them began to quicken their pace. Cheng Qian and the other five also protected them as they quickly moved toward the Gao mansion's entrance. Their sudden acceleration and abnormal behavior attracted the attention of the people who were secretly following them. This time, in order to hit the target with one strike, more than 20 people in the city were responsible for the follow-up work nearby. More than 30 people were lying in ambush on the only way to the Yang village outside the city. They had found the best place to fight. When there were open mountains all around, they believed that they could catch their target, Madame Snow. Whether it was because they had underestimated the enemy or because they were overconfident, after Lu San arranged everything, he took two of his trusted subordinates to a brothel and began to have fun. In his opinion, with such a delicate arrangement, Madame Snow would be captured easily. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before this fairy-like woman would appear beside his bed. Because of their carelessness, they did not go to the scene to give orders. When Cheng Qian and the others suddenly changed their behavior, more than 20 people in charge of this part of the city were dumbfounded. They did not understand how the enemy had discovered them. They also did not know what to do next. Should they take action, wait and see, or wait for an opportunity? While these people were still at a loss, Cheng Qian had already made the decision to fight back. He took the initiative to strike first to gain the upper hand. When the sedan came to the stone pillar beside the Gao mansion's entrance, the four Lung Feng who carried the sedan quickly took off the 95 style from their backs. Then they stood next to each other in the only blind spot where they could attack. They blocked the sedan as a human shield, just in case Madame Wei San was safe. When the four of them had finished all this, Cheng Qian had already given the order to shoot. However, the first shot was not aimed at the enemy, but at the lanterns hanging high in the street. Bang! In such a quiet night, the gunshot was so clear and soul-shaking. With one shot, a lantern hanging high in the sky fell to the ground, making the place dark. Bang, bang, bang! Gunshots rang out one after another. One after another, lanterns fell from the sky, causing the street that was originally visible to the naked eye to suddenly plunge into darkness. It really made people feel like they could not even see their own fingers in front of them. Under the gunshots, the sparse crowd on the street was immediately agitated. They covered their ears and ran around like headless flies, trying to relieve the fear and dread in their hearts. In contrast, the assassins who were prepared to follow them did not run around in all directions. However, the sudden darkness still stunned them and caught them off guard. When their vision turned completely dark, their habit prevented them from regaining their vision in a short period of time. The only thing they could do was to stay put and wait for their retina to recover from the situation in front of them. However, it was at this moment that Cheng Qian and the others made their move. With the help of the advanced night vision goggles, they immediately locked onto the people who were following them. Then, they slowed down their breathing and exhaled slowly. After testing the direction of the wind, they focused their eyes and placed the index finger of their right hand on the trigger. Then they gently moved it. Spinning bullets flew out from the barrel of the gun. While the assassins were still waiting for their vision to recover, the bronze bullets accurately drilled into their bodies. Under the powerful lethality and accurate shooting, many of the assassins did not even know what was going on. They were either shot between their eyebrows or had their hearts pierced, causing them to fall to the ground. In just 10 breaths, 7 or 8 assassins were killed by a single shot. There were also 4 or 5 who were unlucky enough to move their bodies because they heard the gunshots and were not killed by a single shot. However, most of the bullets hit their bodies as well. It was just that the bullets did not hit the critical areas. This result caused many people to scream in pain. The sound of gunshots, shouts, running, and screams were incessant, creating a chaotic scene in the alley. Madame Shui, who was in the sedan, had already woken up. She instinctively wanted to lift the curtain and run out of the sedan. However, Yang Chendong's figure appeared in her mind and she remembered what Lu Lang had told her. Remember, no matter who you are, once you encounter danger in the future, if you are outside, immediately lie down on the ground. If you are in the room, immediately find a safe place to hide. If you happen to be in the sedan, unless the guards let you go, you must not rush out. Also, try to lower your body as much as possible to reduce the chances of being hurt. Thinking of this, Madame Shui quickly squatted from her original sitting position. Then, she listened to the gunshots outside and hoped that Lu Lang would appear soon. The gunshots outside were loud and abrupt in the quiet night. The soldiers of the warden's office who were patrolling nearby heard the gunshots and quickly rushed over. Some of the nearby brocade guards also drew their embroidered spring sabers and ran over. However, these people were far inferior to the members of the Cold Front who were guarding the streets of the Immortal Abode, Sky Beyond, and Young Family's Bank when they heard the first gunshot. Battalion Commander Wu Shang was squatting in the courtyard, practicing the basics of stabilizing his lower body. However, when he heard the first gunshot, his camouflage jacket was already in his hand. Then, he heard the faint sound of gunshots. He whistled, and a platoon of 30 Cold Front members quickly gathered. Chapter 254. Platoon 2, Follow Me. Platoon 1, Be on high alert. Platoon 3, Be responsible for patrolling. If you notice any dangerous people approaching, you can shoot to kill if the warning is ineffective. While he was giving the order, Wu Shang had already rushed out of the courtyard with 30 soldiers, following the sound of the gunshots. However, no matter which group it was, no matter how fast they were, they could not be faster than the assassins that had already surrounded the street. The sudden gunshot had indeed caused them quite a bit of damage, and they were even knocked dizzy. However, they did not forget what their mission was. Even with the sound of gunshots, it did not stop them from approaching the palanquin. This was also thanks to the darkness of the night. If it was during the day, they would not have the courage to approach the palanquin when they saw how tragically their companions died and how accurate the firearms were. It was because of the cover of the night that they thought their opponents were only using firearms that were not accurate and did not have much power. This was why they had the courage to approach the palanquin. With the help of the night vision goggles, Cheng Qian and the others continuously shot the assassins in black on the street. 1, 2, 3, 4. Soon, the street was filled with corpses. The smell of blood began to spread rapidly in the air, rushing into people's nostrils. It was so stimulating. In front of the 95 style, not a single assassin could get within 30 steps of the palanquin. They did not even have the chance to make a move before they died on the ground. Even when they died, they could not close their eyes. Without finding out the cause of their deaths, they could not close their eyes in peace. The assassins seemed to have been killed and there was no movement. However, Cheng Qian did not have the slightest intention of letting down his guard. Fire a red signal flare and explain the situation to the outside. At the same time, everyone stay in place and be alert. If you notice any danger, don't hesitate. Don't be afraid of wasting bullets. A red signal flare rose up following the order. It was so dazzling and eye-catching in the dark night. Even the hidden sentries in Xianxia village that were 15 miles away could see it clearly. Seeing that it was a red signal flare, the sentry immediately sent a signal to another sentry not far away. Soon, Yang Chendong in the Yang family manor received the news. During the day, he taught the students numbers. In the Ming dynasty, it was also known as arithmetic. When the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 appeared, it made the 100 students feel strange and curious. In fact, such numbers had appeared before, but because there was a kind of number called swanchu at that time, it was more convenient to write, so Arabic numbers were not popularized in our country in time. Now that it was taken out by Yang Chendong, everyone was curious as to how it could be calculated in such a way. However, when the multiplication formula was read out, everyone was shocked. It turned out that arithmetic could have such a pattern and be so simple. For a moment, everyone was shocked. Hu Yan, Qiao Yin, and the others who were listening from the side were also shocked by this method. For a moment, everyone's mood to learn was very high. At the end of the day, Yang Chendong's mouth was a little dry from all the teaching. Not long after class ended, he heard a subordinate report that a red signal flare had flashed in the capital. According to the agreement, a red signal flare meant that there was danger, but it had basically been resolved. When there were only 2 flare, it meant that there was a need for backup. When there were 3 flare, it meant that there was an emergency. But even though he knew the significance of a red signal flare, Yang Chendong was still a little nervous. He did not know who was going to attack his faction. Thinking that there was nothing wrong with being careful, he immediately gathered a platoon of Cold Front soldiers, brought along Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Chiovi's First Guard squad, and rushed to the capital. After he left, The Yang family manor was also quickly placed under martial law. Battalion Commander Tang Shan led the remaining 2 platoons of cold front soldiers to guard it to ensure that nothing went wrong. In the capital, Cheng Qian's squad of soldiers had been on high alert this entire time. Even though the corpse was not far away, no one went to investigate. This continued until Battalion Commander Wu Sheng arrived with the first batch of soldiers. After the 2 sides met up, they immediately began to inspect and deal with the scene. Fortunately, they found 2 uninjured assassins and quickly detained them for a sudden interrogation. But just as this was done, the embroidered uniform guards and the 5 cities warden's office arrived. Just as they were about to approach the scene, they received a warning from Battalion Commander Wu Sheng. Those who have come, listen up. I don't care who you are. Which yamen do you belong to? This place has already been sealed off. No one is allowed to approach. Otherwise, don't blame the bullets for not having eyes. With Wu Shang's words and the mention of the banner of his mercenaries, the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office naturally obediently stood their ground. On the other hand, the embroidered uniform guards who came relied on their status to shout that they were the emperor's personal guards and had the right and duty to inspect everything. As they shouted, they also tried to move closer. Bang! Bang! 2 gunshots suddenly rang out, hitting the feet of the embroidered uniform guards who were about to step forward. The dust that was kicked up instantly taught them how to behave. The originally shouting voices immediately became much softer until there was no more movement. The mercenaries had once more used their strength to show the outside world that they were not subject to any restrictions. Anyone who dared to challenge their military discipline would have to pay the price in blood. No one moved forward, but this did not mean that no one was paying attention. On the contrary, it didn't take long for the upper echelons of the embroidered uniform guards and the 5 cities warden's office to arrive. This included Inspector Shi Hang, who had returned to the capital before the end of the year, Commander Sun Po, Commander Lu Gue, and fellow Commander Ji Guang. What's going on in front? Why was there a gunshot? As soon as Shi Hang appeared, he asked arrogantly. Shi Hang had been promoted to Inspector General, Commander-in-Chief, and Count of Wuqing for his meritorious service, and then he had led an army of 150,000 soldiers to battle the Walla. But because he had been too careless, he had been schemed against and lost the battle. If not for Yang Qindong's timely intervention, the capital would have been lost. Logically speaking, a defeated general was a guilty general and should have been punished and imprisoned. But in the Great Ming, nothing was absolute. Meritorious officials could not receive substantial rewards, while guilty officials could rise to the heavens in a single step. This was a characteristic of the time. In the Great Ming, a person's meritorious service was not determined by how capable they were. In the end, it depended on whether they obeyed the emperor and obeyed imperial authority. Shi Hang originally had the merit of being the emperor. This time, after he came back, he spent a lot of money and even bribed Ji Ning. In addition, when he saw Zhu Qiyu, the Daizong, he was in pain with snot and tears. He said that he was loyal to the emperor and would listen to the emperor's orders. He was willing to do anything for the emperor. After a few maneuvers, Zhu Qiyu was truly moved. Not only was he not punished, but he was also reinstated to the position of military governor. He was even given the important task of rebuilding the army with Ji Ning. He was promoted from his original position of Count Wuqing to Marquis Wuqing. Zhu Qiyu's intentions were extremely clear. He wanted to promote Shi Hang and restrict Yang Qindong's influence in the army. Regaining the emperor's trust and wielding great power made Shi Hang feel like he didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. As soon as he arrived, he began to speak as if he were the master of this place. In response to Shi Hang's behavior, the subordinates all lowered their heads in silence. These people had been in the capital for a long time, and many of them had even witnessed the battle between the mercenaries and the Walla. Naturally, they knew how powerful these people were. It was precisely because they knew that they didn't have the courage to provoke them. Seeing that no one answered his question, Shi Hang's expression turned ugly. What's the matter? No one answered, right? Very well, after this matter is over, you don't have to work anymore. You'll all be dismissed. Is Sun Tong's command department here? Go and see what's going on. Sun Tong, who was called out, had a bitter expression. He had already known from the soldiers that this was a mercenary army doing something. He had a very clear impression of these people, and of course, he knew that they were not to be trifled with.
Therefore, when he heard Xianxia call out his name, he carefully moved closer to him and muttered, "Sir Inspector, this is a mercenary army doing something.
It's not good for us to interfere too much." "What mercenary army doing? It's not good for us to interfere too much. Isn't this the capital of the great Ming dynasty?" "Humph. Since you're so cowardly, I think you don't have to work anymore. Forget it. I'll go take a look myself. Men, clear the way. If anyone dares to block my way, arrest them as well," Xianxia said nonchalantly, treating Sun Tong's good intentions as nothing more than ill intent. After Xianxia gave the order, the soldiers he brought opened the path and walked toward the center of the battlefield with great fanfare. Not far away, LV Gue and Ji Guang saw all this, but neither of them had any intention of reminding them. Since someone wanted to clear the path, they could just let him do it. It was also a good opportunity to see if these mercenaries really dared to provoke anyone and not give face to anyone. Xianxia, who didn't know what others were thinking and had only heard of the mercenary army's name, walked toward the center of the battlefield under the gazes of the crowd and the lanterns held by several of his trusted aides. On the dark street, several lanterns slowly walked over. This scene was particularly eye-catching, and naturally attracted the attention of Battalion Commander Wu Shang. "Who are you? Stop. If you continue to walk forward, we won't be polite. This official is the great Ming dynasty's inspector, and I have the authority to command the military camp in the capital. Who are you? Why are you making such a big commotion in the middle of the night?" Xianxia walked forward under the protection of his soldiers and questioned loudly. Based on his experience, it was very easy to intimidate others with this kind of momentum and make the opponent feel afraid. Chapter 255. They approached with a menacing aura, giving off the impression that a large army was approaching. If it was a normal Ming soldier, he might feel afraid and guilty. However, in front of the most elite cold front, there was a limit to what he could do. The first thing to do after entering the cold front was to train one's courage. If one did not have enough courage and was timid, they would never be able to enter this elite new army. Hence, Xianxia's self-righteous yelling did not have any effect. On the contrary, Wu Shang casually took out his pistol and pointed it at Xianxia's direction. He said, "I don't care who you are. Before the Duke of Loyalty arrives, no one is allowed to come close. Please stop." When Xianxia heard someone mention the name of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, his face was filled with dissatisfaction. Ever since he returned to the capital, he had heard of the Duke of Loyalty the most. There were even many people who compared him to Yang Chendong, which made the commander, who had a lot of experience in the army, displeased him. No matter what, Xianxia was a veteran who had experienced hundreds of battles, right? He also had many years of experience patrolling the borders and had fought many wars with the foreign races. It was not an exaggeration to say that he had climbed out of a pile of corpses. However, someone actually compared him to a young man who had just turned 20 years old. How could he accept this? When he heard the Duke of Loyalty's name, he was even more indignant. "Oh, I insist on coming over. What can you do about it? Come on, archers, get ready. If these people dare to resist, shoot them for the crime of rebellion." Before he could finish his sentence, a loud gunshot interrupted him. Then, the lantern on Xianxia's left was shot to the ground. The gunshot first flashed, then it turned into darkness. The sudden change in the lantern gave Xianxia a fright. He instinctively leaned towards the lantern on the right. Just as he was about to lean over, there was another loud gunshot, and the other lantern was extinguished. The two consecutive gunshots were a warning. This was a warning from Wu Shang to Xianxia. It could also be seen as a warning from the mercenaries to the great Ming army. Two gunshots rang out, and the effect could be said to be very good. At least the scene was quiet, and it seemed that they were really frightened. After a few seconds, Xianxia suddenly shouted, "Come, these mercenaries are going to kill the Imperial court officials. All archers, get ready." As soon as he shouted, the soldiers of the warden's office of the 5 cities took out the bows and arrows on their backs and prepared to draw their bows and arrows. Although it was still dark, there was a feeling of mutual hostility. Any veteran with some sense of battlefield could feel a kind of suffocating pressure. Under the invisible pressure, some soldiers began to tremble. This was a human's instinctive reaction when faced with fatal danger. Compared to the reaction of some of the great Ming soldiers, Qian also became a little nervous.
However, he was more worried about the safety of the third madam than himself. In the eyes of Qian and the other mercenaries, their lives were already the sixth young masters.
Their deaths were not regrettable. After all, the first lesson on the first day of joining the mercenaries was to face death and not be afraid of death. However, the third madam was different. If something happened to her, even if they all died, it would be difficult for them to truly close their eyes and die in peace.
Under the night vision goggles, he saw that there were at least 300 great Ming soldiers with bows and arrows. He imagined that when these arrows came from a distance, he and the other mercenaries would not be able to survive.
Then, no one would be able to protect the third madam.
For the first time, Wuxia lowered his head and said, "The third madam of the Loyal Guild is in the sedan.
If she is hurt, have you thought about what the Loyal Guild will do?" Qian's voice was very loud and seemed to be clearer in the darkness. When it reached the Ming army, the expressions of LV Gui, Ji Guang, Sun Tong, and the others changed drastically. They had all dealt with Yang Chendong and even tried his methods. Although this duke was young, his methods were really terrifying. If they really pushed him to the edge, they were afraid that no one present would be able to get away with it. No one would have a good ending. Among the crowd, Sun Tong's reaction was the fastest. In fact, he had received the most kindness from Yang Chendong.
"Admiral, the third madam of the Loyal Guild is also here."
It's better not to shoot arrows casually. Once innocent people are hurt, the consequences will be serious. What consequences will there be? Hang, who had already shot the arrow on the bow, responded coldly.
"Even if the third madam of the Loyal Guild is here, she will be sacrificing herself for the country."
I think the Loyal Guild will understand. Hang's meaning was very simple. He wanted to use the excuse of disturbing the Ming army to deal with the mercenaries and destroy their prestige.
As for the so-called third madam of the Loyal Guild, they could only blame it on their bad luck.
He really wanted to see what the young Yang Chendong would do after such a thing happened.
Could it be that he really dared to do anything to him, the great Ming dynasty's admiral?
This duke doesn't understand. As soon as Hang's voice fell, another loud voice sounded. Then, countless lights suddenly shot from afar and shone directly on the bodies of the great Ming dynasty's soldiers. Hang, who was hiding among them, had nowhere to hide. At this critical moment, Yang Chendong finally arrived. As soon as he arrived, he heard Hang's words and immediately replied angrily.
Along with this voice, 10 members of the First Guard Squad and 30 members of the Lung Feng Squad took out their military flashlights and shone them forward.
The military flashlights in the large warehouse were piled up. Yang Chendong had entered and exited the warehouse several times and equipped everyone with this kind of advanced treasure.
Now that the light flashed, the electric light that could clearly illuminate 100 meters away caused all the Ming army and the embroidered uniform guards to fall into a place where they had nowhere to hide.
Under the strong light, Hang couldn't help but squint his eyes. He was even more shocked. He couldn't understand what kind of advanced weapon this was. How could it illuminate the night as if it was daytime?
Most importantly, in such an environment, his body was exposed to the advanced firearms of the mercenaries.
Didn't this mean that if they wanted to shoot him to death, they could easily find him and execute him? At this moment, Hang had an extremely bad feeling in his heart. Hang didn't know that even without the strong light, he was still in the sights of the Lang Feng squad. However, Yang Chendong still chose to do this as a serious warning. As soon as the strong light appeared, the first to panic were the great Ming soldiers who were holding strong bows. They thought that they could luckily shoot arrows in the dark. But now, they were clearly seen by others. How would they dare to move? This caused all the Ming army to become very obedient when Yang Chendong appeared. Taking advantage of this pressure, Yang Chendong strode forward and arrived at the juncture between the two armies. His cold gaze swept over the people who had just arrived. Suddenly he roared, "Are you crazy? Don't you know that these are mercenaries?" Yang Chendong's question made many Ming soldiers lower their heads. They couldn't answer this question. Even Lu Gui, Ji Guang, Sun Tong, and the others lowered their heads. They didn't want to answer this question. Or rather, they didn't want to face the Duke of Loyalty and Yang Chendong. Hang naturally felt everyone's emotions. However, at this moment, he absolutely couldn't lower his head. It was not because of anything else, but because he was the one who shouted the most fiercely just now. If he was the first to admit defeat when Yang Qindong appeared, how could he lead the troops? So after about 10 seconds, Shiheng finally raised his head after he had more or less adapted to the strong light. So what if they are mercenaries? In the territory of our great Ming dynasty, anyone who casually kills people will be punished no matter who they are. You are Shiheng? Seeing that someone actually answered his question, Lang Feng's squad's eyes lit up. Yang Qindong's eyes narrowed as he stared coldly at Lang Feng. I am Marquis. Shiheng, who didn't want to weaken his momentum, tried to straighten his body as much as possible as he answered. Don't call yourself Marquis in front of this duke. When I was a Marquis, you were just a small count. As soon as Shiheng finished speaking, Yang Qindong's angry voice spread through the entire street. The questioning voice was like thunder, and Shiheng was naturally furious. However, at this moment, he didn't know how to answer. After all, he was indeed 10% worse than Yang Qindong in terms of title. At this moment, he actually began to hate the acting emperor, Zhu Qiyu. He hated that Zhu Qiyu didn't directly promote him from Count Wuqing to Duke Wuqing. That way, he could confidently talk to Yang Qindong. However, he didn't think about it. Yang Qindong was promoted to Duke because Zhu Qiyu had no choice. He really didn't know how to reward Yang Qindong, so he had to do something. And what did he do? What contribution did he make? Shiheng still had an unconvinced expression on his face. When he was still sulking, Yang Qindong spoke again. Just now, you said that, so what if they are mercenaries? Then let me ask you, if there were no mercenaries, who would resist the Walla's army? Without the mercenaries, the capital would have already been taken over by someone else. So what right did you have to stand here and make such a fuss? You look down on the mercenaries, but what have you done? Have you lost every battle? Under the angry questioning, Shiheng only felt his face burning. He wanted to refute something, but he found that it seemed that he was powerless to say anything. Yang Qindong, after angrily scolding Shiheng until he couldn't say a word, seemed to be still angry. He followed the strong light and looked at LV Gue, Ji Guang, Sun Tong, and the great Ming soldiers. He asked, Shiheng is a defeated general. During the battle to protect the capital, he didn't know where he escaped to. It's normal that he isn't familiar with the situation. But what about you? You all experienced that battle, so how could you not know the power of the mercenaries? Have you thought about it? If they were injured because of this, once the leader of the mercenaries asks, how would I answer? If we don't respond well, the mercenaries will become enemies with the great Ming. Who can stop them? Chapter 256. And you genie guards, don't you like to join in the fun? Do you like to watch the fun? You clearly know that this Duke's third madam is here, but you didn't say anything. Do you want the previous incident to happen again? In anger, Yang Qindong said threatening words. As for the previous incident, it was naturally referring to the eunuch who claimed to be his duke and clashed with Yang Qindong's title of duke. Later, when the reminder was to no avail, more than 10 eunuchs and stewards were threatened in one night and almost lost their lives. After that incident, no eunuch called himself master anymore. Even if they had to call him master, they had to call themselves master. Now, Yang Qindong mentioned this incident. It was obvious that he intended to admit that he arranged for someone to do that. But with such an admission, LV Gue did not dare to question him. On the contrary, he hurriedly lowered his head. He, who had experienced Yang Qindong's power more than once, naturally knew the serious consequences of angering him. As soon as Yang Qindong appeared, he first reprimanded Shiheng. Then, LV Gue, Ji Guang, and Sun Tong did not run away. Even the soldiers of the great Ming dynasty lowered their heads in shame. With such momentum, there was no need to continue the war. The winner had already been decided. Under the angry reprimand, no one dared to confront him. Yang Qindong seemed to be less angry. He turned around and walked to the side of the soft sedan. As soon as he opened the curtain, Madame Snow, who was wearing a brocade robe, plunged into Yang Qindong's arms and shouted, Lu Lang, I'm scared. I almost couldn't see you again. Don't be afraid. With Lu Lang here, no one will dare to bully you. Yang Qindong reached out and patted Madame Snow's back. He looked at Xianxia and said, Tell me what's going on? Master, it's like this.
In order not to expose his relationship with Yang Chendong in front of outsiders, Cheng Qian did not call him the sixth young master directly. Instead, he called him master. "Tonight, we'll send third madam back to Yong Manor." From Cheng Qian's mouth, he recounted everything that happened that night from beginning to end. From these words, everyone finally understood what had happened and why the mercenaries had opened fire in the city. At the end of his speech, Cheng Qian pointed to the ground and said, "Duke, all the bodies of the killers are here.
There are still 2 survivors.
They just confessed that they are the subordinates of Lu San, a scoundrel in the city. They were ordered by their boss to cause trouble for third madam."
Lu San?
Yang Chendong repeated the name, his eyes filled with murderous intent. He then turned his head abruptly and looked at Lu Gui, Sun Tong and the others, saying, "Everyone should have heard very clearly what's going on. Next, will you be the one to capture this person, or will I be the one to do it?"
We'll do it.
Capturing criminals is one of the responsibilities of the embroidered uniform guards, Lu Gui quickly said.
Lu Gui hurriedly interjected.
He didn't dare to leave the task of capturing people in the city to the mercenaries. If they really were to do it, the gunshots on the streets would inevitably injure the innocent. When the time came, the capital would fall into chaos, and he wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility for the crime.
Yes, we'll do it.
The warden's office of the 5 cities will fully cooperate with the embroidered uniform guards.
Sun Tong also quickly expressed his position.
Shi Hang, on the other hand, had been standing to the side. It was as if he had become an outsider as he watched Yang Chendong give orders.
"Well, I'll leave it to you.
If you can't catch Lu San or catch a dead person, I'm afraid you'll have to report that the mercenaries were almost killed.
At that time, if anything happens, you'll have to deal with it yourself."
After explaining the seriousness of the matter, Yang Chendong turned and left, carrying Madame Shui, under the protection of the others. Yang Chendong left, but the matter was far from over. The embroidered uniform guards and the warden's office of the 5 cities immediately took action. For someone like Lu San, who had a criminal record, it was not difficult to find him. An hour later, Lu San, who was waiting for news in the red light district, was caught. Yang Chendong personally sent Madame Shui to his luxurious carriage and rushed back to the Yang village with a large group of people. Hu Yan and Xiao Yin had been waiting in the village for a long time. When they saw that Madame Shui was safe and sound, they breathed a sigh of relief. "Young master." In the courtyard of the inner courtyard, Yang San had already knelt on the ground. The security bureau had not noticed Lu San's sudden action at all, which was a dereliction of duty. Fortunately, Madame Shui was fine. Otherwise, Yang San really did not know how to face the young master. Yang Chendong, wearing a cotton cloak, came to the courtyard and stood in front of Yang San with a cold and stern face. Yang San was obviously angry, which made him feel even more at a loss and lower his head. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei stood on either side of Yang Chendong. They wanted to say something for Yang San, but before they understood the young master's meaning, they did not speak. The tense and depressing atmosphere lasted for a while. When Yang San could not help trembling because of the pressure, Yang Chendong finally said, "Try to control as many forces as possible. This kind of thing will not be allowed to happen again. As for how much money you need, just write a report." Yang Chendong's voice contained no emotion. Madame Shui had almost had an accident. It was impossible to say that he was not worried, but it was also impossible to blame the security bureau. After all, the capital was too big and there were too many people. How could they be aware of everything? The only thing they could do now was to constantly increase the strength of the guards and strengthen the strength of the security bureau. With enough money, they should be able to take some precautions. Yang San had been kneeling on the ground. It was not until Yang Chendong left that he slowly stood up. Tiger's Mane, who stayed on the side, stepped forward and comforted the subordinate. "Don't blame the young master for being angry. Madame Shui almost had an accident this time. Anyone would not be able to bear it." "I know. The young master has been very kind." Yang San nodded heavily. Of course, he did not blame the young master. He had thought that after such an incident, he would not be able to keep his position and might even be kicked out of the family. However, the young master still gave him a chance. As the saying went, a gentleman would die for his bosom friend. Even though Yang San's life had long been the young master's, this belief became even more firm.
Not to mention how angry Yang Chendong was in the Yang manor. After Lu San was captured in the capital, he did not even last a night.
Under the various methods of the brocade guards, he confessed everything.
He directly said that Yu Xiong had spent 50,000 taels of silver to hire him to make trouble for the Duke of Loyalty. Yu Xiong was the mastermind behind the scenes. Once the result was out, someone sent the news to the palace, someone sent the news to the Yang manor, and someone sent the news to the Yu manor. Imperial City. Imperial Palace.
Last night's incident had already been reported to the emperor.
The acting emperor, Zhu Qiyu, had already learned the whole story from Ji Ning and Shi Heng. Zhu Qiyu did not comment on the fact that Yu Xiong wanted to make trouble for Yang Chendong.
There were always some people in the world who were incomparably daring.
Even he couldn't help but want to curse them for seeking death. But on the other hand, the fact that the mercenaries had killed people in the city truly displeased him. This was the capital of the great Ming dynasty, at the foot of the imperial city. The mercenaries had brazenly killed people on the streets. When had they ever cared about what other people thought? Who had given them the authority to enforce the law? But Zhu Qiyu had no choice but to suppress his anger.
After all, he had long ago known of the strength of the mercenaries.
Walla had not been a match for them, so how could he be a match for them now?
He was the emperor, the sovereign of the 9 and 5, but in his own territory, there were things that he could not interfere in.
He felt incredibly vexed. Sirs, tell me what you think. Zhu Qiyu's voice was cold, indicating that he was not in a good mood. In fact, he was in a terrible mood. Shi Heng and Ji Ning looked at each other.
Then the military commander plopped to the ground and said, "Your Majesty, it is said that the fist is the absolute truth."
For the mercenaries to dare to do this, they are clearly looking down on imperial authority. This subject believes that if we want to put an end to this, we must first strengthen ourselves. This subject requests that Your Majesty increase the amount of silver and increase the speed of recruiting soldiers. At the same time, we must equip 3 firearm battalions and 1 artillery battalion. Once we have enough strength, no one will dare to challenge imperial authority or Your Majesty.
I second the motion.
Ji Ning also knelt on the ground and voiced her support for Ji Ning. As Zhu Qiyu's most trusted subjects, the two of them were well aware of their positions. Only when the emperor's authority was strong enough would their authority be secure. Just as they had said earlier, if the army could be completed sooner, with 3 firearm battalions and 1 artillery battalion, they would have the strength to fight against the mercenaries. When the time came, if they really wanted to attack, once the cannons were fired, the entire place would be razed to the ground.
At that time, who would dare to look down on them and the emperor?
That's right, my dear subject. You are right. The fist is the absolute truth. How about this? I will immediately increase the amount by 2 million taels of silver to expand the army. Zhu Qiyu nodded repeatedly, looking as if he had been persuaded by Shi Heng's words. Hearing that it was only 2 million taels of silver, Shi Heng was a little unwilling. This amount of silver was enough to build a normal army. But this time, they were building 3 firearm battalions and 1 artillery battalion. That was definitely an act of burning silver. 2 million taels was really not enough. Just as Shi Heng was about to raise his head and say something, he heard Jin Ying's quiet reminder. Lord Shi, don't go too far. Some things need to be discussed at length. As one of Zhu Qiyu's personal attendants, Ji Ning naturally had a deep understanding of this emperor. This emperor was an ambitious person. His courage was no less than Zhu Qijuan's. His mind was flexible and he was open-minded. He treated his subjects well. But there was one thing that was a little too stingy. Chapter 257. Of course, this also had a lot to do with the fact that the National Treasury had only recently been paying out and not coming in. This time taking out 2 million at once was already the limit. If Shi Heng made another request, not only would he not increase it, but it was also uncertain if the 2 million would even arrive. Shi Heng, who was about to say that the silver was too little, immediately shut his mouth when he heard Jin Ying's suggestion. He kowtowed to the ground and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty. This subject will immediately go and build a new army. I believe that it won't be long before the great Ming's army returns to its former glory." Very good. Hearing Shi Heng's promise, Zhu Qiyu's face finally revealed a trace of a smile. As long as he had a strong army,
he wouldn't have to rely on or fear anyone. He could defeat Ingzong and unify the Great Ming. He wouldn't have to worry about the expressions of the mercenaries. Just as Zhu Qiu's face was filled with yearning, the eunuch on duty outside the door walked in and said in a sharp voice, "Reporting to your majesty, Minister Yu of the Ministry of Justice requests an audience."
You sure you? What is he doing here?
Hearing this, Zhu Qiu, who still didn't understand what was going on, was at a loss. However, the head eunuch Jin Ing had already whispered, "Your Majesty, that Yu Xiong is Minister Yu's grandson."
Oh right. Zhu Qiu nodded.
Then he looked at Jin Ing and Shi Hang and said, "My two beloved subjects, what do you say about whether we want to see him or not?"
The two important subjects looked at each other and shook their heads.
In the end, it was Jin Ing who took the initiative to say, "Your Majesty, Yu Xiong is extremely daring. He wants to harm the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Since this is the case, I'm afraid we won't be able to protect him."
That's right. Shi Hang nodded heavily in agreement. Obviously, what happened last night had left a deep impression on Shi Hang.
After witnessing the power of advanced firearms, the shadow of death had been shrouding him. If it was not possible, he absolutely did not want to offend this loyal duke, because he did not know what the other party would do in anger. If the other party really wanted to kill him, even if he went back to the emperor to make the decision for him, what meaning and use would it be if the dead could not be brought back to life?
Jin Ing and Shi Hang had the same idea. Zhu Qiu nodded and made her decision. He naturally knew what Yu Shiyue meant by coming here at this time. However, he had to pay the price for doing something wrong. What's more, he had offended Yang Chendong. He deserved it. Even with his identity as the emperor, he couldn't say anything.
Since he couldn't make the decision for him, it was better not to meet him, so as to avoid hurting the relationship between the ruler and his subjects.
Pass down the message. Say that Zhan is not feeling well. If there is anything, say it at the morning court tomorrow. Zhu Qiu waved his hand at the young eunuch who came to report. He made the decision to not meet him. The young eunuch left.
Yu Shiyue, who was waiting outside the palace, heard the emperor's words and sighed deeply. Then, he shook his head and slowly turned to leave. His grandson was extremely daring. He had actually taken the initiative to find trouble with the loyal duke. After learning of the matter, Yu Shiyue knew that things were not good. His first reaction was to see the emperor and plead for leniency. He thought that no matter what, he was an old official and an important official. The emperor should give him some face. As long as the emperor was willing to mediate, the loyal duke would have to give him some face. However, the emperor did not want to see him. This had already made his attitude clear. Now, it seemed that he could only beg the loyal duke himself. However, when he thought about how the other party was still a child who had just grown up, if the news of his status asking to see the other party spread, how would he have any face in the future?
Forget it. It's just a crime of instigating. There is no conclusive evidence and no serious consequences. Based on my position as the Minister of Justice, without conclusive evidence, it won't be so easy to touch Xiong'er. Minister Yu comforted himself like this and left the palace. He was prepared to use his power to wrestle with the loyal duke. Yu Shiyue was a person who had studied since childhood. He had a photographic memory and could recite with a glance. In the 13th year of Yongle, 1415, he became a grand scholar and served as an imperial censor. After Zhu Qiu ascended the throne, he was promoted to the position of Minister of Justice. He could be considered to be extraordinarily capable. Moreover, when he was young, he was also upright and honest. However, now that he was old, his temperament had changed a lot. In order to achieve his goal, he had also done some things that inverted right and wrong. His personality was hypocritical and polite, and he was no longer as hard-hearted and impartial as when he was young. This time, the matter involved his own grandson. Although he had more than one grandson, how could he casually abandon his own family? As such, he left the palace and headed straight for the Ministry of Justice. The power of a Minister of Justice was not something that others could imagine. Yu Xiong's case involved criminal matters. Naturally, it was not a problem to take him away from the embroidered uniform guard and transfer him to the Ministry of Justice. The embroidered uniform guards were having a headache. Yu Xiong had already been caught. He had been dragged out of his bed early in the morning. Now that he had been caught, how to deal with him and how to interrogate him had become a headache.
On one hand, it was the loyal duke, who was the victim. On the other hand, it was the old Minister of Justice. It seemed that no matter what they did, it would be easy to offend them. It was at this moment that a document from the Ministry of Justice arrived, requesting that the suspect, Yu Xiong, be sent to the Ministry of Justice for interrogation. Since someone wanted a hot potato, how could the embroidered uniform guard be polite? They immediately sent Yu Xiong out and had some peace and quiet. The Ministry of Justice took over and the news was quickly sent to Yang Chendong. At this moment, the sixth young master was teaching students in the Yang Family Academy and imparting his new knowledge. Today, Yang Chendong was talking about the effects of gravity. He was teaching everyone that everything could be explained scientifically. Just as the lecture was in full swing and everyone was listening with great interest, Tiger's Mane came and whispered something in Yang Chendong's ear. Got it. Yang Chendong nodded and a faint smile appeared on his face. Then, he turned to the 101 students and said, "Today's lesson will end here. Everyone, go back and review. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me tomorrow. Let's study by ourselves." Under the respectful gazes of all the students, Yang Chendong left the academy. Outside the door, the head of the security bureau, Yang San, was already waiting. What happened? Yang Chendong took a wet towel and wiped his hands as he asked Yang San. "Young master, Yu Xiong was arrested early in the morning. Yu Shiyue went to the palace, but the emperor did not see him. However, after returning to the Ministry of Justice, he ordered people to take his grandson from the embroidered uniform guard to the Ministry of Justice and protect him. Because the people protecting him are all his trusted subordinates, they don't know what happened. However, it can be seen that they have no intention of compromising and are still holding on to hope." Yang Sen explained everything he knew to Yang Chendong and then stood respectfully to the side. His job was only to tell the truth. As for the specific decisions, it was up to the young master to make the decision. "Oh. Haha, this minister you wants to compete with this young master." Yang Chendong was not surprised at all. On the contrary, he chuckled. However, the smile quickly disappeared. "Did you find the person I asked you to find?" The so-called looking for someone referred to how Yu Xiong had forced her husband to write a letter of separation in order to protect himself in a foreign land in order to get a woman. A few days ago, when Yang Chendong met with Yu Xiong, he arranged for the security bureau to search for Yu Xiong. There should be news by now. We found him. According to the young master's orders, he is coming to the capital under the protection of the security bureau. He will probably arrive tomorrow night. Yang San said with his chest puffed out. It was already a dereliction of duty that they did not receive any news of the attack on the third madam. Now, they could not allow any more mistakes. Not bad. Hearing that the person would arrive tomorrow night, Yang Chendong's face regained its confidence. Inform Assistant Minister Su that this young master wants to see him. The so-called Assistant Minister Su was naturally the right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Su Yozhen. This person had publicly impeached Yang Chendong, but in reality, he was the first person to side with him. It was time for him to come in handy. Su Yozhen was one of the most powerful officials in history. Unfortunately, in his later years, he became an official who was punished. Because of Yang Chendong's appearance, his life was completely changed. At the very beginning, Su Yozhen was merely an imperial censor. When she was a mere 7th grade official, she wasn't valued at all. It was Yang San who suddenly found him and gave him a large sum of money. While improving his life, Yang San also asked him to do some things within his power. After that, his career was smooth sailing. He rose all the way up to the position of a 6th-rank official, then a 4th-rank official of the Taichung Temple, and now a 3rd-rank official of the Ministry of Personnel. It could be said that he was rising up the ranks at an astonishing speed. And all of this was inseparable from Yang Chendong's support and operations. Gradually, Su Yozhen gave birth to an idea. That was, relying on this Duke of Loyalty seemed to be a good thing. At the very least, she could do a few things for him. Not only did she receive an official position, she also received money, and she even had a reputation. Where else could she find such a perfect thing? This was how people were. After receiving benefits, their attitude and understanding of a person would undergo a qualitative change. Was this not the case? When Yang San informed Su Yozhen through the spies of the Security Bureau that the Duke of Loyalty had invited her, He quickly disguised himself and left the capital, arriving at the Yang family manor. Su Yozhen's appearance was extremely secretive. On the way, there were people from the Bureau of Security following him to ensure that he was not followed. Not long after, a carriage stopped in the backyard of the Yang manor. Su Yozhen, dressed in a black robe and a bamboo hat, stepped out of the carriage. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.